Don't Say Maybe by Cindy Kirk, narrated by Amy McFadden. Chapter 1. Nyla Driscoll let her gaze slide around the table. What had she gotten herself into? She didn't have time to mentor not just one, but 5 first-generation college graduates. The professional football season was in full swing, and as a high-ranking executive in the Grizzlies football organization, she worked long hours. Her focus needed to be on the team. Why had she agreed? It was a pointless question, as Nyla already knew the answer. Darren Flock had asked her to step in when the previous mentor had taken ill. "I'm sorry I'm late." A blonde with pixie hair slid into a chair opposite Nyla at the round table. "Not late, Trini." The redhead seated next to her smiled. "Right on time." "Now that we're all here, let's get started. You've probably heard by now that Kayleen underwent an emergency appendectomy last night." Nyla rested her folded hands on the table. "She's resting well, but will not be returning for the final 4 sessions." A chorus of sighs rippled around the table, telling Nyla that the corporate wellness guru was well liked. Though Kayleen had led the group for only 2 sessions, it was obvious that she'd bonded with these women. "I'll be taking over for her. I'm Nyla Driscoll, President of Operations for the Colorado Grizzlies. I realize everyone in this group has different career goals. Whether you're interested in working for a nonprofit or a for-profit, what you'll face will be applicable in any sector." Nyla glanced at her notes. "Let's start with introductions." Before she could say more, a woman with dark brown hair and eyes raised her hand. At Nyla's acknowledging nod, the woman said, "Hi, I'm Olivia. Before we go around the table and share, could you tell us a little about your own career path?" "Kayleen told us about hers," the redhead clarified when Nyla hesitated. "Knowing her path was helpful." Before Nyla could respond, the door opened, and Darren Flock strolled into the room. Tall, with wavy blonde hair, brown eyes, and a keen intellect, he did it all for Nyla. Even now, her pulse quickened. Too bad her family despised his family. "Mind if I sit in?" Nyla gestured to the lone empty seat, which was beside her. "I believe this chair has your name on it." "Hello, everyone. It's good to see you all again." Darren's warm smile had everyone relaxing, including Nyla. Darren focused those incredible brown eyes on a woman with pale skin. "Amber, I appreciate you securing a place to meet on such short notice." Amber flashed a brilliant smile. "I was happy to help." "I'm still working on where you can meet next week," Darren explained. "I haven't found a location that's centrally located, but We can meet at Silver Creek," Nyla interrupted. If Nyla hadn't been looking, she might have missed the surprise that slightly widened his eyes. His gaze searched her face. "That won't be a problem?" She almost said, "Why should it?" when it hit her. This mentoring program was a Flock initiative. Silver Creek was owned by the Driscolls. Never the twain shall meet. Darren was right. It could be a problem. Still, Nyla's grandmother, Halcyon, was a fierce advocate for female empowerment. That's what this mentorship program was about. Nyla met Darren's gaze head-on. "No problem at all." "Ms. Driscoll was about to tell us about her career journey," the redhead said. "Maybe you can tell us yours as well." Darren turned toward Nyla and smiled. "If you'll share your secrets, I'll share mine." Nyla only smiled. No one was telling any secrets. She refocused her attention back on the group, conscious that the clock was ticking. "I have loved football for as far back as I can remember. My grandparents took me and my siblings to all of the Grizzlies games. My father purchased the team when I was in high school. During college, I interned there and started working my way through the various departments once I graduated." "That must have been nice." The redhead sounded wistful. "Privilege has its own downside," Darren responded before Nyla had a chance. "My situation was much the same as Nyla's, except mine was with Flock Inc. It was always expected that I'd be part of the business. While I enjoy the work, I never had the opportunity to really decide where I wanted to be. This was new information. She and Darren had never discussed their careers, Nyla realized. They'd done a lot of talking the 2 weeks they'd spent in Paris. Had they deliberately steered clear of anything to do with business? Possibly. Probably, Nyla decided. How strange that she should learn something new about Darren in this venue. Now that you know a little more about us, Nyla turned to the woman with the pale skin and mass of tangled dark hair. Would you like to start? Tell us a bit about your background and your career goals. She listened as Amber Wells introduced herself, then described her parents as hardworking factory workers determined to give their daughter a better life. Olivia Hernandez spoke of growing up in a Spanish-speaking household and the challenge of learning English when she started kindergarten. Now, being bilingual was an asset. Simone Jones smiled with pride when she spoke about her single mother working 2 jobs and moving their family of 4 into a 2-bedroom apartment so that Simone and her siblings could be in the best school district. Katie Ryan, red-haired and freckled with a sunny smile, talked about being raised by her grandmother after her mother overdosed. And, finally, Trini Waisaki, the almost late arrival, shared that she grew up in foster care and went to college on a scholarship. Thank you all for sharing. While the women had been speaking, Nyla had made notes. Now that we have the introductions out of the way, we can... Kayleen started each session with a 10-minute meditation. Amber pushed a strand of hair back from her thin face with an impatient gesture. I have the meditation app with that session on my phone. I'd be happy to play it for the class. Thanks, Am. Olivia's tone turned droll. After the day I've had, God knows I need to center myself. The other 3 women chuckled and nodded. Nyla realized she had 2 choices. Remind the group that she was now the leader of this group, or give in on this point. Just as she did every day, Nyla weighed the options and made a decision. Quickly, decisively. This group had already begun traveling down a certain road, and going along appeared prudent for now. Nyla offered a perfunctory smile. Ready when you are, Amber. Because she knew curious eyes were on her, Nyla participated in the exercise of deep breathing, followed by visualization. By the time the session concluded, the tightness in Nyla's shoulders had eased. That was fantastic! Olivia blew out a breath and rolled her shoulders. I realize you've met twice, Nyla said. I'd like someone to tell me what you covered during those sessions. For the moment, she would ignore the lesson plan she'd developed after Darren's call. Before any of the women could respond, a loud shriek followed by laughter and running feet sounded outside the door. I apologize for the noise. 2 bright swaths of pink colored Amber's cheeks. When Mr. Flock told me about Kayleen, he mentioned he needed to find a place for us to meet. I volunteer at this middle school and got permission from the principal to use this room, but just for this one time. Where were you meeting before? When Darren had given her this address, she'd simply assumed the school was the regular location. At Kayleen's home. Trini inclined her head. Only then did Nyla see the jagged scar running down the side of the woman's neck. Will we be meeting at your home? Simone asked. Do you live at Silver Creek? Though her grandparents and brother lived in the multi-use high-rise owned by the Driscoll family, Nyla had no plans to move in there. No. Nyla gave no explanation. She was between permanent residences at this time, but even if she hadn't been, she carefully guarded her personal space. I'll get us a conference room at Silver Creek starting next week. Once I have it firmed up, I'll text you the room number. That's a cool building. Katie smiled. I can't wait to see the inside. Now that we've got that bit of housekeeping out of the way, Nyla let her gaze sweep the table. Let's get on with business. Who can tell me what was covered during the initial 2 sessions? The first week we did the meditation, then introductions. It was more in-depth than what we did today. We sat on the floor in a circle. Amber glanced around the table, much as Nyla had done only moments before. We shared what we value in our personal and professional lives, what our lifestyle is like now, and what we would like it to be. Don't forget our long-term goals, Katie piped up. Simply touching on them took nearly the entire second session, Trini added. Our assignment for this week was to look at the long-term goals we presented and come up with a tentative plan that included steps necessary to help us reach those goals. Simone met Nyla's gaze. Kayleen said this week we would work with her individually and with each other to tweak those steps to be the most effective. Trini raised her hand, speaking only once she'd been acknowledged. We were also supposed to share successes and challenges from this past week. Nyla nodded her approval. You covered a lot of ground in 2 90-minute sessions. Kayleen knew we wanted to take advantage of this opportunity. Olivia, who Nyla pegged as the informal leader of the group, spoke again. I don't know if you're aware, but we had to go through a selection process for this mentorship. Nyla had to admit she was impressed by Kayleen's approach. The life and health coach, well known in Denver business circles, had a stellar reputation. Though Nyla had only seen her in action one time, the accolades were well-deserved. I don't believe we'll have time this week to cover your long-term goals. Email me the information you compiled, and I'll review everything before our next session, so we can hit the ground running. Nyla ignored the disappointed looks. We do have time to share successes and challenges from this past week. Nyla turned to Darren. Would you like to stay? The last thing she wanted was for him to get up while one of the young women was speaking. She recalled a meeting early on in her career when one of the EVPs had left during a presentation she was giving. Though she'd kept going, it had shaken her. Absolutely. He smiled and lifted his hands. Carry on. Pretend I'm not here. Successes? Challenges? Nyla refocused on the group and waited. Simone raised her hand. At Nyla's nod, she said, On the positive side, one of my slogans appeared to hit the target. The challenge is that the guy I shared it with told his superiors that he came up with it. Nyla had to count to 10. This kind of stuff happened all the time in business, and not only to women. That didn't make it any easier to swallow or to deal with. I had something similar happen to me this week. Trini scowled. I work as an event planner for a large organization. I got the group an amazing deal on the hotel for an upcoming conference. My supervisor told me because I'm technically still on probation, I don't get any credit for it, not even a mention in my personnel file. I think we've all experienced what Trini and Simone are facing now. Amber's comment received nods of agreement from the others in the group. Perhaps you and Mr. Flock could give us your ideas on how to deal with occurrences like these? Without blowing up our careers. Katie's comment made everyone laugh. Despite the laughter, Nyla saw by the looks in all the women's eyes that this was serious stuff. There's nothing more infuriating than when someone takes credit for your work. Nyla wanted to jab an elbow in Darren's ribs. When he'd asked her to take over this group, she'd thought this would be easy. So far, it was taking more concentration than she had after a tiring day filled with endless meetings. Or perhaps, and this was more likely, the lack of concentration came from trying to play it cool with Darren so close. The important thing to do when this happens is to keep your composure. Darren nodded his agreement. In Trini's case, if the policy of her employer is that someone on probation isn't given the credit for a booking, that can't be helped. Nyla shifted her gaze to focus on Trini. That doesn't mean you can't keep track of what you accomplished during your probationary period, so you can bring up these successes during your performance evaluation. Darren cast a glance at Nyla. In Simone's case, I'd start documenting. Keep a dated file of slogans so you can prove what you came up with. Nyla paused, considered. In the future, if you have to share your idea with him, Do it over email or with another person present, so there's a record of what was said. Nyla fixed her gaze on the woman, keeping her tone conversational. Would you feel comfortable doing something like that, Simone? Simone shifted in her chair. I really like this job. Which meant, Nyla knew, that she didn't want to rock the boat. Only you can decide what you're comfortable doing. Nyla tapped her pen against her pad of paper. The problem with not wanting to rock the boat is, this guy will more than likely do the same thing again. How would you all feel about doing some role-playing? Darren smiled. The group I observed last week had similar issues and decided to role-play possible responses, and then the group offered suggestions. That sounds interesting. Olivia brightened. Since we're short on time today, you and Ms. Driscoll could show us how it's done. Nyla barely stifled a groan. Darren shot her a devilish grin. I'm up for a little role-playing. How about you? If you don't want to do it, Ms. Driscoll, simply say so, Katie told her, and heads around the table bobbed their agreement. That was part of the ground rules Kayleen gave us at our first meeting. I don't mind a little role-playing. As she gazed at Darren, an image of one of the bedroom games they'd played in Paris flashed. Heat flooded her body. The answering flicker in his brown depths told her he remembered, too. Before we get into the role-playing, I'd like you to give me your opinion on the suggestions I offered. Nyla waited. The women around the table exchanged glances, but no one spoke. After several more beats of silence, Nyla said, carefully modulating her voice, You are smart, educated women with opinions. When someone specifically solicits your input, that's the time to give it. Simone lifted a hand, waiting until Nyla nodded before speaking. Sometimes people ask for your opinion, but they don't really want it. You're going to be our mentor for the next month, Amber added. Maybe it's like Simone says, and you don't really want our input. We don't want you to dislike us, or get on your bad side. All the heads around the table nodded, with the exception of Darren, who merely sat back in his seat. Let me ask a different question. Nyla kept her tone even and tried not to let her frustration show. In general, tell me why you think you should respond when someone asks your opinion. Nyla waited. Olivia cleared her throat. If we don't respond, you might construe our silence as agreement. Very good, Olivia. Nyla punctuated the approval with a nod. Not only because you bring up an excellent point, but because you chose to speak first. Speaking up shows we're invested in the discussion, Amber interjected. Responding shows we're committed to the process. More good points. Nyla could have let it drop here, but wanted everyone to get a chance. What else? Katie smiled. I had a professor once tell me that when you stay silent, people don't always recognize your ambitions and desires. You need to make it known what's important to you. Another good point. Nyla glanced at Simone and Trini, the two who had yet to respond. Piggybacking on what Olivia mentioned, Trini gestured to the woman. If we don't agree with what's being considered, remaining silent could make you think we do. Not responding also can give the impression that we don't care enough one way or the other, Simone added. All excellent points. Nyla smiled, liking the rise of energy in the room. Now, tell me how you think Simone could handle her idea-stealing colleague. Chapter 2. 30 minutes later, the scraping of chairs filled the room before the five headed out the door, leaving Nyla and Darren alone. She gathered up the papers she hadn't used and dropped them back into her satchel, then stood. I was disappointed there wasn't time for role-playing. Nyla laughed. Maybe next time. You did a good job with them. You sound surprised. I'm not. I'm impressed. The discussion that ensued during the last part of the session was amazing. They're a good group. Nyla glanced around the room, making sure everything was picked up. I think Simone's example in particular was timely. It's something we all face. I have no doubt the next time they have some fabulous idea, they'll think it through, then present it to a group rather than to an individual. I think you're right. Nyla chuckled, then looked up at him. I was surprised when you walked in. I wanted to see how it was going, and, she prompted, make sure you didn't hold it against me for pulling you in during your busy season. Please. You know me well enough to know that if I didn't want to lead this group for the next 4 weeks, I'd have said no. True. He smiled and took her arm as they moved to the doorway. That directness is only one of the many things I like about you. Before they stepped out of the room, she lifted his fingers off her arm. When he cocked his head, she smiled. We're not in Paris anymore. True, but you agreed to let me prove to you we don't need Paris. We can be just as great right here. I did not agree. I said maybe. Maybe is a start. They strode down the long corridor. Do you have time to grab something quick? Even though they were alone in the hall, Nyla lowered her voice. My parents got back from Italy yesterday. My grandparents are having everyone over tonight. A kind of welcome home celebration. Are your parents aware of your brother's engagement yet? Nyla wasn't sure why she hesitated to answer such a simple question. Maybe because she'd grown so used to not discussing anything related to her family. JR and Britt FaceTimed with them while my parents were still in Italy and gave them the happy news. Happy news? Darren arched a brow. He's barely known her 2 months. Though Nyla might have expressed that same thought to her brother, she would not voice it to anyone else. He and Britt are amazing together. Darren slid an arm around her shoulders. As amazing as us? Once again, she lifted his fingers off, but smiled to soften the gesture. We agreed to be discreet. Discreet is not getting up close and personal in a middle school filled with students and their phones. They've long since headed home. Darren shrugged. Besides, at this age, they don't know who we are, nor do they care. The words had barely left his mouth when 3 girls rounded the corner, talking so fast Nyla couldn't make out a single word. Though they cast quick, curious glances in Nyla and Darren's direction, their steps didn't slow. Darren's lips lifted in a wry smile. Thanks again for taking over for Kayleen, especially on such short notice. Kayleen's husband texted me last night, just before they took her into surgery. Any other man I'd have turned down without a second thought. Nyla adjusted the strap of her satchel over her shoulder. I realize this is a bad time for you. My job is crazy year-round. Nyla blew out a breath. I've got my fingers in so many pies. I'm going to have to get better at delegating. You're a perfectionist. She slanted a quick glance at him, so tall and handsome, as they strolled side by side down the long hall. Pale green lockers lined both sides, and despite all the kids who walked down it daily, the linoleum floor underfoot still retained a shine. Perfectionist. She mulled over the word as Darren pushed open the door leading to the parking lot at the back of the school. I like the high achievement part of the designation, but I don't have a fear of failure, and I don't wait to do things at the last minute. Darren inclined his head. Those are 2 common characteristics ascribed to someone who's a perfectionist. Darren held up his hands. I meant it as a compliment. You said it when I mentioned I had difficulty delegating, she pointedly reminded him when they stopped at her car. Instead of opening the door, she turned to face him and found him right there. The sun might have set, but the lights in the lot bathed them in a golden glow. For a second, Nyla was tempted, seriously tempted, to wrap her arms around his neck and kiss him. She knew what those lips felt like against hers, knew how he tasted. Need rose, nearly swamping her with its intensity. Then she remembered the picture the paparazzi had taken of Britt brushing a kiss across JR's cheek. The paparazzi loved to sensationalize. If they got a picture of a Driscoll kissing a flock, Nyla inwardly shuddered. Though she sympathized with how Britt had been treated by the tabloids, the story had also brought her deception to light. Nyla couldn't tolerate an employee she couldn't trust, so she'd let her go. Placing her palm against Darren's chest, Nyla gave him a gentle push back. Even a photo of them standing this close together, alone in a dark parking lot, would be enough for a scandal. "What were we talking about?" Darren asked, his gaze fixed on her lips. "Nothing important," she told him, hearing and hating the breathless quality to her voice. What was there about Darren Flock that elicited this kind of reaction? You'd think she was a teenager with no experience with men. Granted, she didn't have a lot of experience. She'd been too busy working to devote much time to personal pursuits. But neither was she young and naive. "You know what I miss most?" His voice, soft and low, wrapped around her heart. She moistened her suddenly dry lips with the tip of her tongue, her gaze never leaving his eyes. "What?" "Simply spending time with you." His mouth curved. "I wish we could make a day of it and go sailing at Union Reservoir, or walk down to Civic Center Park and peruse the food trucks, grab a pizza and a beer at Levitt Pavilion and enjoy a concert." "I don't think they allow alcohol at Levitt." Darren just smiled. It was then that Nyla realized she'd responded to the literal instead of the heart of the matter, which, in this case, was his desire to be with her away from public scrutiny. When her brother JR had come up with his alter ego persona, Amos Lee, Nyla had been baffled. JR said he went out incognito to avoid people bothering him with their comments about Grizzlies football. She'd known it went deeper than that, but she hadn't understood. Now she did. She'd give anything to be able to spend time again with Darren with no fear of others noticing their closeness. She lifted a hand, ready to cup his cheek, but let it drop. Why was it so difficult to be this close and not touch? What was it about this man that tempted her? "I'd like that too." There was no need to say more. They were on the same page. They both had a lot to lose if either of their families found out they were friends, much less lovers. "I've got a cabin in Morrison, a recent acquisition." He spoke quickly, as if wanting to get it all out before she stopped him. "It's private and quiet. Best of all, no one in my family knows about it." Nyla's mind raced with the possibilities, but the rational side of her rose to the surface. "Surely you've taken friends or other women there in the past." He shook his head. "No one. I got it just for me. A place to go when I need the quiet." Where did she go when she needed quiet? She searched for possibilities and came up empty. "It sounds nice." "Spend the weekend there with me." His dark eyes took on an entreating glow, tempting her to step further off the solid shore of what she'd always known onto shifting sand. "The Grizzlies play this week on Thursday night, which means we could meet at the cabin on Friday after work and spend the entire weekend together." Nyla was tempted. Oh, how she was tempted. While it was true there wouldn't be a game this weekend, her 2 weeks in Paris right before the season began had put her behind on several projects. "Projects you could delegate," a tiny voice in her head whispered. "You are the boss." The silence stretched and extended. Darren shrugged. "Just a thought. I should—" "Maybe." Her hand on his sleeve stopped him. She met his gaze. "Okay, text me the address. I'll be there." The smile that spread over his face bathed her in warmth that told her she'd made the right decision. She needed to see where this, well, whatever this was between them, was going. Had what they'd shared in Paris seemed so special because of the city, or because of the forbidden nature of their romance? Nyla didn't think either option was the case, but there was only one way to find out. She was going to spend the weekend with Darren Flock. At 8, Nyla strolled into the lobby of Silver Creek, her family's multi-use high-rise in Denver's Golden Triangle. Tonight's dinner would be in her grandparents' penthouse. As she rode the express elevator that would take her directly to the top floor, Nyla counted her blessings. Number one on the list was that the focus this evening would be on her brother's engagement. Everyone in the family had been to Italy numerous times, so any details of her mom and dad's recent trip would be more of a side course than the main dish. The team was on a winning streak and expected to trounce their opponent on the gridiron tomorrow. Her trip to Paris, less than a month earlier, was old news and would likely not be mentioned outside of a remark or two. Tonight, JR and Brittany Appleton would hold center court. A smile lifted Nyla's lips as she knocked on the door. Her smile began to wear thin 2 hours later when JR and Britt had yet to make an appearance. Dinner had been served and the dishes cleared away. The family had retired to the living area for port and sherry. JR just texted. Halcyon studied her phone. The hospital is getting ready to send Bee home with her husband. I assume that means she's okay. Nyla's mother, Margene, glanced at her mother-in-law as if Hal had more information than she'd already relayed. According to what Hal had told them all when Nyla had first arrived, Beatrice, Britt's twin, had experienced an anaphylactic reaction to a wasp sting. Bee's husband, Clay, had called when Bee reached the emergency room and was receiving treatment. That's all I know. Hal set her phone down and accepted the glass of sherry from her husband. Other than Britt and JR are on their way up now. I'm sad about her sister, but happy they're still coming. I'm looking forward to meeting Brittany. Margene gave a little laugh as she looked at her husband, Ross. I can't believe our son is engaged. Seems to me that JR jumped into this relationship very quickly. Ross frowned. I don't understand the rush. You don't think... Margene hesitated. Could she be pregnant? Ross's gaze pinned Hal. You'd have told us. It wasn't a question, but a statement. No, Nyla thought, taking a sip of sherry and finally relaxing fully. She didn't have to worry about her parents paying any attention to her. The doorbell rang, and Nyla sprang to her feet. I'll get it. She crossed the room and pulled the door open. Welcome! Her smile fell away. Though Britt had done a good job of hiding it, the evidence of tears was evident in her red-rimmed eyes. I'm sorry about your sister. How is she doing? Nyla's gaze searched her eyes. Better. Britt's mouth lifted in a smile that appeared forced. I actually spoke with Bee myself. She told me she's ready for Halloween because her face is so swollen you can't even see the bridge of her nose. Fresh tears flooded Britt's violet eyes, but the young woman blinked them back. She'll be okay. That's what matters. You can't keep an Appleton down. JR's tone might be teasing, but concern filled his eyes when he gazed at Britt. Not just concern, Nyla thought, but love. And when Britt looked up at JR, that same love shone in her eyes. You didn't have to come tonight. Nyla spoke in a low tone. Everyone would have understood. Britt surprised Nyla by reaching out and squeezing her hand. Thank you for that. JR told me the same, but he's been eager for me to meet his parents, and I've wanted that too. Nyla stepped aside. Can I get either of you anything to drink? JR glanced at Britt. She shook her head. We're fine. JR took his fiancée's hand. The gesture surprised Nyla. She couldn't recall her brother ever being into public displays of affection with any of the previous women he'd dated. Then again, Britt was the first one he'd asked to marry him. Nyla returned to the sofa and let herself take on the role of observer. Introductions were performed, sympathies offered for Britt's sister's situation, the normal getting acquainted kind of talk before the questioning began. I understand that my son met you when he was in Good Hope this summer. Ross offered a pleasant smile as he took control of the interrogation. In Nyla's mind, her father was larger than life. Successful businessman, civic leader, head of the household. Someone who didn't tolerate fools, and who had very strong ideals. Nyla admired him, She strove to make him proud. Actually, Britt offered Ross a smile, her hand still firmly clasped in JR's. I only saw JR when he was in Good Hope. He met my sister and spent time talking with her, but his path and mine didn't cross until I arrived in Denver. Hal mentioned you came to Denver hoping for a job with the Grizzlies. Margine coupled the comment with a smile. Her mother, much more easygoing than her father, must have been feeling left out of the conversation. Or maybe she wanted to soften the 20 questions feel of her father's inquisition. I did. Britt shot a wry smile in Nyla's direction. I loved my time at the Grizzlies, but I'm now in the process of forming my own social media company. Britt is a whiz with social media, Dad. Pride sounded in JR's voice. She's already got 3 solid clients and more inquiries coming in from other athletes every day. Now you're engaged. Ross's gaze shifted from his son back to Britt. And living together. The muscle jumping in JR's jaw and the sudden tense look on his face told Nyla that he was equally unsure where this was going. We are, Britt began. When JR opened his mouth, she gave her head a little shake, as if to say, I got this. Nyla's admiration for her future sister-in-law inched up a notch. I realize it seems fast to you. Britt's tone remained pleasant. You're right. We haven't known each other all that long. But I love your son, Mr. Driscoll, and JR loves me. Is it my son you love, or everything that comes with him? Dad! JR's sharp tone could have cut steel. I fell in love with him when I thought he was a construction worker named Amos. JR had to try hard to convince me that he was that man. Britt gave a little laugh. If you read that recent article, you know that I was involved with a rich, entitled playboy before. That wasn't the kind of man I wanted. You didn't want Denver's most eligible bachelor? Nyla's teasing tone had JR scowling and Britt chuckling. No way! Britt slanted a glance at JR, who leaned over and brushed a kiss across her temple. But that's what I got, and I'm keeping him. More questions followed, but her father's intensity seemed to ease. Maybe it was because Ross sensed he could easily cross a line with his son if he wasn't careful. Or perhaps, and Nyla thought this was more likely, because Britt was charming him. Unless you were blind, you could see how much the two loved each other. When her mother asked Britt if she could help with wedding planning, Nyla knew the couple was home free. She and Darren wouldn't get the same acceptance. Nyla? Nyla blinked, pulling her attention back to the present. Could you repeat that, please? You look tired. Hal's eyes softened. I'm sure it's been busy for you since you returned from Paris, but I'm glad you took that extra week. The smile Nyla had pasted on her face didn't waver, even as her entire body went on high alert. Her father frowned. You stayed an extra week? Taking a breath, Nyla let it out slowly. Do you know how long it had been since I took any time off? Still. Ross! Her mother put a hand on her husband's arm. Our daughter works extremely hard. She was already in Paris. Why not take an extra week? I could see if she'd been there with Kendall. If I'd been there with Ken, I'd have been back in 3 days. Nyla would not get drawn into saying much more, but she refused to feel bad for taking some much-needed time off. The fact that the time had been spent with Darren wasn't the point. I needed to relax and recharge, and that's what I did. You played tourist. JR's tone added a lightness to the conversation. I did. I slept late, visited all the sights, and enjoyed the fabulous food and drink the city has to offer. Nyla saw her father open his mouth and, anticipating his question, added, I was too busy to be lonely. Chapter 3. I don't know what I was expecting. Nyla glanced around the cabin. Something more rustic, definitely. Darren's cabin had a fireplace, a hot tub, and 3 bedrooms, each with its own bathroom. It's secluded, but only a short drive to restaurants and bars. Darren moved to stand beside her as her gaze shifted to the huge windows that overlooked a forest scene, complete with a stream. Red Rocks is only 15 minutes away. Before Nyla could respond, his lips brushed her neck. She arched her head back and sighed as his mouth continued upward. "The value of shorter hair," she murmured. In seconds, his lips reached her mouth, and he kissed her gently, then enfolded her in his strong arms. Nyla thought of herself as a woman capable of handling anything that life threw at her. She'd never been one to lean, never understood the concept. But now, in Darren's arms, she let herself lean, just a little. Resting her head against his shoulder, she toyed with the buttons of his shirt. "I almost didn't come." His lips brushed her hair. "Is that right?" The low softness of his voice encouraged confidences and didn't judge. "I'm used to working 7 days a week. Looking ahead to what I had on my plate for the weekend had me feeling guilty for walking away." "I used to feel that way too." He stepped back, took her hand. "Come, let me pour you a glass of wine. We'll sit in front of the fire and relax before we decide what to do this evening." Reluctantly, Nyla pulled herself from his warm embrace. "Do you think it's cold enough for a fire?" "It's supposed to drop down into the 30s tonight, so I'd say yeah, it's cool enough." He chuckled. "I remember one time when Gavin and I decided to toast marshmallows in the fireplace in July." Nyla thought of Gavin, Darren's eldest brother. She knew him, but not well. He reminded her a lot of her brother, Cameron, who kept his feelings close. "What did you do?" "We cranked up the AC and had a fire in the hearth." The thought of what her parents would have said to such an action had Nyla shaking her head. "What did your parents say?" "It was just the two of us. Our mom was long gone by that point. Dad was at some social event. By the time he got home, the fire was out." Darren flashed a smile. "Crisis averted." Nyla dropped down on the sofa, facing the flickering flames. Seconds later, Darren returned with 2 glasses of red. After handing one to her, he took a seat beside her. "When did you stop feeling guilty about not working an insane number of hours?" The second the question left her lips, Nyla chided herself. She was with a handsome, interesting man whom she hadn't had a chance to spend time with in weeks, and she wanted to discuss burnout? Forget it. "We're not going to forget it." He took her left hand and laced their fingers together. "It's a good question, and something I still struggle with." "You do?" The incredulity in her voice brought a smile to his lips. "I know you think I'm just this handsome playboy, but hey, there's a functioning brain inside this fabulous bod." The teasing tone brought an answering smile. "I'm as driven as anyone, and more than most. I think that drive to excel is in our DNA." Darren stared into the fire, and in profile, his expression turned pensive. "A couple of years ago, I found myself working an obscene number of hours. Worse, when I wasn't at work, I was thinking about it, strategizing, planning, designing." His lips quirked up at the last word. "That's my favorite." "You design?" Though Nyla's focus was football, she was a Driscoll. Despite being totally immersed in the Grizzlies since college, she still kept apprised of what was going on at Velocity. Darren smiled, took a sip of wine. Only then did Nyla remember their pact, not to speak about his work or hers except in the most general terms. "You don't need to answer." "It's not a secret." Darren offered a smile. "You can pull up all the shoes I've personally designed on the internet. Will I tell you about anything specific I'm working on? Of course not. Any more than you'll tell me who you want the team to acquire in the draft." It was a succinct accounting of their agreement. Then why did it sting? Why did it hurt to know that, as long as she and Darren were together, there would be parts of their lives closed off to the other? When did you realize you liked designing? She decided to stick with basic questions. Doing that, there was no chance of sliding into the slippery. At Flock, as with many large companies, employees are moved around. My father believes that way no one gets stale where they're at, or gets tied to the status quo. Moving an employee every few years keeps things fresh. Is that what you believe? Nyla took a sip of wine, curious. I see the value, he admitted, but I also see that sometimes people excel in one area and not in another. There are other ways to keep things fresh. Darren frowned. How did we get on this subject? I asked when you realized you liked design. He chuckled. There's something about your perfume that makes it difficult for me to form a coherent thought. Leaning over, Nyla planted a kiss at the base of his throat. I feel the same about your shampoo. Good to know. His arm slid around her, and he tugged her close. As much as Nyla wanted to sit on this sofa in front of a roaring fire and kiss him, she wanted this, too. Conversation. Connection. She might not know where this was headed, but there was one thing she knew in her heart. What they shared wasn't just about sex. For some reason, that mattered. Tell me about your love of design. Appearing content for the moment to toy with a lock of her hair, he smiled. 2 years ago, I transferred into the design and innovation department. The men and women who work in that area are amazing. I'm in awe of their talent. Nyla nodded and offered an encouraging smile. They taught and encouraged me, and I found I have a knack. Pride flickered in those brown depths. You may not be aware that I'm the guy behind our new design created for athletes with physical disabilities. You designed the Flock Easy Fit? Nyla widened her eyes. That's an amazing shoe. I did. He shook his head. It's so rewarding to read the emails from people raving about how easy the shoes are to put on and take off, as well as hearing from those with different foot shapes who now have a shoe that fits them. Her heart swelled. You made a difference in those people's lives. I guess I did. He shrugged. Right now, I'm working with high-profile athletes. Like Ameline Rousseau? Nyla kept her tone light. Darren lifted her hand and kissed her fingers, one by one. Do you really want to spend time tonight reliving the past few weeks, when we could be focusing on the present? He was right, of course. Besides, anything to do with Ameline fell into the off-limits category. When they'd been in Paris, Ameline had been staying at the same hotel. 5 years ago, at 16, the pretty blonde had defeated the reigning Wimbledon champion to win her first Grand Slam singles title. With that win, she became the second youngest woman to take the Wimbledon title. She'd been winning ever since. Though a fierce competitor on the court, her model-like looks and clean and wholesome image made her a favorite among the press. Nyla and Darren had shared drinks with Ameline and her boyfriend at a small Paris bistro. Ameline had mentioned over lunch that the latest endorsement deal with Nike was coming to an end. Darren had given Ameline his business card. Nyla had mentioned the contact to JR, knowing he would take it from there. She hadn't asked JR if his people at Velocity had contacted Ameline. She'd given him the heads up that Ameline appeared interested. It was up to him whether he pursued it. I'd like it if we could spend time here on weekends. Darren's gaze met hers. When the team doesn't have a game. I understand that's a command performance when they're playing. How about we take this a weekend at a time? While Nyla would like nothing better than to spend every minute with Darren, she had job responsibilities, extensive responsibilities, and wasn't sure how much free time she could carve out. I get it. A mischievous look danced in his eyes. You're hedging your bets, in case you're sick of me by the end of this weekend. You think you know me. She trailed a finger up the side of his arm. I do. His brown eyes looked black in the light. "Then tell me what I'm thinking." Leaning forward, she nibbled on his earlobe. When she moved back, he grinned, put both hands on her face, and kissed her soundly. "You're thinking that it's time to go to bed." Chapter 4. Nyla woke to the sounds of chirping birds, wind rustling through the trees, and the rich smell of coffee. Darren's side of the bed was empty, but the intoxicating scent of his shampoo lingered. After stretching, Nyla swung her legs over the side and pulled her robe out of her suitcase. Neither she nor Darren had taken time to unpack last night. She wandered into the spacious kitchen and found Darren at the stove, wearing pajama bottoms and a t-shirt. Like hers, his feet were bare. He looked up, spatula in hand. "How does an omelet sound?" Strolling up behind him, she wrapped her arms around his waist and gave him a squeeze, then stepped back. "It sounds amazing." She opened the refrigerator and found a half-gallon of orange juice. Pouring 2 small glasses, she kept one for herself and set the other on the counter beside the stove for him. "I thought you'd head straight for the coffee." He lifted the glass to his lips and drained it. "Thanks for this." She inclined her head. "Would you like more?" That was the perfect amount. He shot a glance over his shoulder. "Did you sleep well?" Her lips curved. "I did. It's peaceful here." Darren flipped the omelet onto a plate, then held it out. "Want to split it?" "Absolutely." Nyla opened the refrigerator again. "There's some cut-up fruit in a plastic container that'll make a good side." In a matter of minutes, they sat across from each other, eating the omelet and fruit, and downing several cups of the dark roast coffee. Nyla's fingers curved around the sturdy ceramic mug, liking how the heat from the coffee warmed her hands. "What's on today's agenda?" Darren lowered his mug. His hair was tousled, looking much like it had last night when she'd run her fingers through it. She remembered the silky feel of it, and, her gaze dropped lower, the taste of his mouth. His gaze shifted out the window. "The weather is good, so we have lots of options. There's a couple of mountain bikes in the garage, or we can hike. If those don't appeal, we could check out the nearby towns, or stay here and do whatever." "Let's save the whatever for later." Nyla smiled. "I can't recall the last time I was on a mountain bike. It sounds like fun." Once they finished eating and the dishes were cleared, Nyla dressed quickly, glad she'd decided to bring her hiking boots along. Though the sweater she wore was warm, when Darren went to pull out the bikes, she grabbed a light jacket from her overnight bag. Casting one last glance around the home to make sure everything was turned off, she had one foot out the door when her phone rang. Nyla frowned at her dad's name on the readout. Darren looked up with a questioning glance from the bike seat he was tightening. She put her finger to her lips. "Hi, Dad." Nyla kept her voice casual and offhand. "I stopped by your office. You're not here." It's Saturday." This time she went for teasing. "That's what being out of the country does for you." "You work Saturdays." Puzzlement filled his tone. "You're always here on the weekend." It was true. Nyla couldn't recall the last time she'd taken a Saturday off, much less a whole weekend. She remembered when Kayleen had done an in-service visit for Senior Grizzly's staff. The wellness coach had stressed the importance of balance and making healthy choices in life. "I'm trying to have a more balanced life," Nyla told him. As she said the words, she realized they were true. Though she loved her job, and most days running the Grizzlies didn't feel like work, her time in Paris had taught her that she wanted more. She glanced at Darren, who was scrolling through his phone as he patiently waited by the bikes. "Is this a joke?" Her father's question took her by surprise. Ross Driscoll certainly made time for other things in his life. "No, it's not a joke." Though impatience crawled up her spine, Nyla refused to let it creep into her voice. "Since you stopped by my office, I assume you need something. What can I help you with? Where are you? I thought you were living in your office apartment until you find another place. Closing her eyes, Nyla took a deep breath and did what she was trying so hard not to do, what she didn't want to do. She lied. A friend and I went to the mountains for the weekend. Some shopping, some hiking, some relaxation time. She prayed he'd let that lie and not press for details. To ensure that happened, Nyla returned to her earlier question. Is there something I can help you with? We're just getting ready to go mountain biking. I haven't done that in years. This, at least, was the truth. Once we're on the trail, I won't be able to respond. No. He cleared his throat. My stopping by didn't have anything to do with work. I just wanted to see how you were doing since you and Kendall broke up. You weren't back from Paris before we left for Italy. Love for her father flowed through her veins. Though he wasn't one to show much emotion, he loved her. It means a lot to me that you'd stop by. I'm doing fine, Dad, really. Getting rid of him was a good decision. I can see how the weekend evenings might be a little lonely. If you ever want to spend time with your mother and me, we'd love to have you. Her father hesitated, and Nyla heard the uncertainty in his voice. You can even move back in if you'd like. Your old room is still available. I appreciate the offer. Nyla caught Darren's eye and gave the thumbs up. I've got to go, Dad. Thanks again for calling. I love you, baby. Don't forget that. I won't. Her heart skipped a beat. Love you too. After clicking off, she shoved the phone into her pocket. Ready to go? Darren called. I'm ready. Nyla smiled. This thing with Darren wouldn't last. It couldn't last. But that worry was in the future. For now, Nyla was determined to enjoy every minute of his company. I never realized you could get such a workout on a mountain bike. Nyla sipped the champagne Darren had opened after dinner. Instead of cooking, they'd picked up a meal of bacon-wrapped scallops from a tavern in nearby Morrison. Though it appeared to be a lovely place, there was a concert going on in Red Rocks, so the place was hoppin'. Because of the concert bringing people from Denver, the odds of them seeing someone they knew had skyrocketed. It seemed safer, and more comfortable, to enjoy the meal at home. Darkness had fallen, and even though the temperature outside had started to dip, the water of the hot tub kept her comfortable. Darren studied her through hooded eyes. I don't know that I've ever seen you look so relaxed. I can't recall the last time I've felt so relaxed. Nyla's lips curved. That bike and those inclines gave me an excellent workout. It was also nice to be out amongst nature. My brothers and I loved our mountain bikes when we were younger. Darren took a sip of his champagne. Why do we let ourselves forget about things that bring us pleasure? Like a hot tub? Nyla leaned her head back against the edge. I've had a jacuzzi in every place I've lived, but I rarely took the time to fill it and just let myself enjoy. Darren reached over and took her hand. Come a little closer, said the spider to the fly. Nyla wasn't sure where that came from, but was happy it made him laugh. Once she was, indeed, closer, he leaned over to kiss her gently on the lips. What was that for? She didn't bother to hide her pleasure. Because you're naked in my hot tub? Because you're beautiful? He paused. Because I'm captivated by you? Any and all three. She shot him a wink. I'm captivated by you, too. I realize we still have tomorrow, but I'm already thinking ahead. He searched her face with those warm brown eyes. What does the next week look like for you? It was a little like enjoying a mild autumn day when the upcoming forecast called for snow. It was too easy to let future worries ruin the present. My week is busy, especially now that I've added the mentoring every Wednesday night. We've talked about so many other things, but not about how you like leading the group. He grinned. Perhaps I should have put some distance between us before I asked. He started to slide away, but she stopped him with a hand on his arm. Stay right where you are, mister. Darren smiled and willingly stayed put. Tell me the mentoring isn't as bad as you thought. It's challenging, Nyla admitted. When they brought up someone taking advantage of you by claiming your ideas as theirs, I had difficulty relating. Darren finished off his champagne and poured more. When he held the bottle up to her, she shook her head. I've never had to face that, and I'm betting you never have either. Nyla pulled her brows together in thought. I was a Driscoll, working for my family. No one would dare do that to me. I'm sure the same held true for you. You're right. That was one situation I never encountered. His brows pulled together. However, there were those when I was just out of college who dismissed my ideas because I came up with them. In many ways, I had to prove myself even more than someone who didn't have my last name. I never thought about it that way. Nyla took a moment to consider. Yes, I believe I faced similar situations early on. Now we're old and seasoned and know the score. We are. For Nyla, knowing that score made her sad, because part of that was recognizing that her relationship with Darren would one day have to end. Dating has been difficult. Nyla chuckled. Don't give me that, Flock. I'm not feeling sorry for you. Your face is all over the internet, and I don't think I've seen a picture of you with the same woman twice. I didn't find anyone who kept my interest. His gaze met hers. Until you. He didn't wait for her to respond, but simply continued. It's difficult to know who likes you for who you are and not how much money you have or even for your position in society. You and I understand that because we come from the same world. It can be difficult, Nyla agreed, thinking of Kendall. You were with the last guy a while, Darren ventured. Not really, and we fought most of the time. Nyla's lips quirked upward. It got worse when he learned that my family wasn't going to use his financial planning services. Seriously? Nyla forced a light tone. I knew all along we didn't have a great relationship, but I honestly didn't believe he was stringing me along to get to the family money. His loss. Darren set down his glass of champagne and set it on the side of the hot tub. He then took Nyla's glass and set it beside his. Then he opened his arms. Come over here. I'm right next to you. Sit on my lap. Her lips twitched. I can see where this is headed. Maybe, but not right away. His arms remained open until she slid onto his lap. Once she was settled, he wrapped his arms around her. You are a beautiful, intelligent woman who deserves better than a man like him. Nyla's heart swelled. Inclining her head slightly, she gazed into his eyes and forced a light tone. Someone like you? You be the judge. When his mouth found hers and the water swirled around them, Nyla didn't even have to think to know the verdict. All she had to do was feel. Chapter 5. The buzz from Claudia, her personal assistant, on Tuesday morning had Nyla scowling. Coming back from Morrison's Sunday night had meant she'd gotten little done over the weekend. Monday had been spent playing catch-up. Ms. Driscoll, Brittany Appleton is here to see you. Nyla frowned. Why would her brother's fiancé be here? There was only one way to find out. Send her in. Pulling to her feet, Nyla rounded the desk and pasted on a smile when Britt entered. Though dressed casually in a fall plaid dress and boots, Britt still managed to look professional. I apologize for dropping by unannounced. I have a quick question to ask you, and I wanted to ask in person, rather than over the phone. You came at a good time. Nyla smiled. After one set of meetings, and before the afternoon ones begin. Like I said, it will only take a minute. Nyla supposed she could remain standing. Britt could blurt out the question she came to ask and be on her way. But Britt wasn't just an unscheduled visitor. She was the woman JR loved. Once the wedding vows were spoken, she'd be family. "Please." Nyla gestured toward the sitting area. "Have a seat. May I get you something to drink?" "I'm fine, thank you." Britt sat, smoothing the plaid fabric over her knees. Nyla took the seat opposite her. Though Britt did a good job of hiding it, the young woman was nervous, which made Nyla even more curious about the question she'd come to ask. "How is your sister?" Nyla asked. The smile that blossomed on Britt's lips told Nyla the answer, even before Britt spoke. "She's doing really well. We FaceTimed last night, and even though the swelling is still there, it's way down from where it had been. Bea says she feels good, and that you'd never know anything had happened, except for how she still looks." As if realizing she'd been rambling, Britt clamped her lips shut. "I'm glad to hear it. Seeing her looking so much better had to ease your mind." Britt nodded. "I remember when Eve, she's the baby in the family, fell and slashed her face open on a rock. She had to have stitches. She was in middle school at the time, and I was envisioning this jagged scar across her cheek." Nyla chuckled. "When I came home from college over Thanksgiving, the scar was barely noticeable. My parents, of course, had the suturing done by the best plastic surgeon in Denver. While the scar is still there, makeup covers it completely." Who's rambling now? Nyla thought. And where had those memories of Eve come from? She hadn't thought of that episode in years. "You do understand." The tenseness in Britt's shoulders eased. "I hated missing dinner the other night, but I simply had to know that my sister was okay before I could relax and enjoy myself." Everyone understood, Nyla assured her. Keeping her voice casual, she inclined her head. "What is it you needed to ask me?" Britt took a deep breath and squared her shoulders. "I would love for you to be one of my bridesmaids." Britt rushed on, as if seeing the refusal hovering on Nyla's lips. "JR and I both want this to be a family event. My sister will be my matron of honor. I'd like you and Eve to be bridesmaids." "Surely you have friends who'd love to be in the wedding." "I have friends, but I'm not that close to them anymore. And JR and I want a small bridal party. For me, my sister, you, and Eve, and for him, your other two brothers and Boone." Nyla paused. She hadn't expected this and found herself at an unexpected loss for words. "Say no if you must, but please know I really do want you in the wedding party." "You want me, even after I terminated your internship?" That was why she'd never expected to be asked to do anything in connection with the wedding, especially not anything as significant as being a bridesmaid. "Old news." Britt waved a dismissive hand, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "One day we'll laugh about how we first met." Nyla suddenly wondered if there was any chance at all, that the same could happen with her relationship with Darren. Would the family one day laugh about the feud, call it old news, and relegate it to the history books? "Nyla?" Britt's voice broke through her thoughts. "What do you say?" This was, Nyla reminded herself, her future sister-in-law. This was the woman her brother loved. Nyla smiled. If she couldn't have her own happy ending, at least her brother would have his. "I say yes." Despite getting a sweet early morning text from Darren, Nyla chalked up Wednesday as a day she would just as soon forget. She was buried in work, and it felt like she was trying to dig out with a spoon. So much work, and so little time. When her watch buzzed, signaling it was time to leave for her mentorship meeting at Silver Creek, Nyla groaned aloud. Still, she rose and headed out. She'd made a commitment, and she'd follow through on it. The next time Darren Flock tried to sweet-talk her into something, she would tell him no. She'd booked Conference Room A on the 3rd floor of Silver Creek. The women were all there waiting. Nyla noticed that someone had made sure there was coffee, tea, and water, as well as an assortment of cookies. "Help yourself to the drinks and the cookies. We're the last meeting scheduled in this room for today, so otherwise they'll go to waste." The women didn't need any more of an invitation. They moved quickly and were soon back in their seats. Nyla told herself she'd regret having caffeine this late in the day, but poured herself a cup of coffee anyway. "It's good to see you all back." Nyla let her gaze scan the group, pleased to see most of the women were smiling and appeared relaxed. The last thing she wanted to deal with this week was unexpected drama. "I assume we'll start with the meditation?" "Yes, please." Trini expelled the words, making the others laugh. "I hear you, Trini." Nyla surprised herself by saying, "I could use it too." Amber brought up the meditation exercise on her phone, and the soft, soothing voice guided them artfully through the session. As she had the previous week, Nyla felt better when it ended. Until she opened her eyes and saw Darren in the doorway. A flock in a Driscoll building? It was unheard of. Except, Nyla reminded herself, that these lower floors were designated for business use. "Mr. Flock," Simone called out. "Welcome back." Darren sauntered across the room. Though his smile was directed at everyone, Nyla felt its warmth and realized just how much she'd needed it. Needed him. It was such an unsettling thought that she nearly frowned, but recovered her composure just in time. "Your seat is waiting for you." Katie pointed to the empty chair next to Nyla. Everyone, including her, had chosen to sit in the same places as last week, so Katie was right. The seat beside Nyla seemed to be waiting for Darren. "I'm sorry I missed the meditation." Darren dropped down into the chair. "I could use it today." "You need to come earlier next time," Olivia told him. "Ms. Driscoll starts right on time." Though Nyla believed strongly there was a time and place for formality, it seemed, at least in her mind, to be an unnecessary barrier with this group. These women faced enough barriers in their day-to-day without experiencing it in this group. "Since we'll be working through these issues as colleagues, I'd like us all to be on a first-name basis. Please, call me Nyla, everyone." She caught Darren's approving look. "Good idea, Nyla." Darren offered a smile. "I'm Darren." The women exchanged glances, then nodded. "First, thank you for sending me your long-term goals and your plans for meeting them. In the next 24 hours, I'll be responding with my thoughts and suggestions." "I probably won't be around long enough where I'm at to worry about goals." Trini seemed to murmur that to herself, but Nyla heard. Nyla had noticed that the young woman appeared on edge from the moment she'd walked into the room. While the others chattered as they gathered their drinks and cookies, Trini had plopped herself down in her seat, her face a mask of misery. Instead of taking the limited time they had in this session to discuss individual long-term goals, Nyla had identified 4 areas that were common to everyone and planned to bring one up for discussion. After a momentary internal struggle, she ignored the agenda on the tablet in front of her. "Trini, I may be off base, but it appears you've had a difficult day. Is what happened something you'd like to discuss this evening? Problems one faces in the workplace are often common to all." Nyla felt sure something was troubling the woman, but offered her the out in case she preferred not to share. Still, from what Trini had said, she didn't have any family and had never mentioned any close friends. Whatever was troubling the young woman, Nyla hoped she'd consider talking it out with this group. Trini hesitated, then gave a jerky nod. "Okay, well, Jason, he's the guy I report to." Simone pointed to Trini. "The one who took credit for your booking." The blonde's lips lifted in more of a grimace than a smile. "That's the guy. Did he—" Olivia began, but Nyla raised a hand to stop her. "Let's let Trini tell us what happened without interruptions." Nyla offered Trini an encouraging smile. "Go on." "Jason called me into his office today. When he shut the door, I thought he was going to yell at me about something." She paused. Conscious of Nyla's warning, no one stepped in to fill the silence. "He started off by commenting on how nice I looked today, asked if what I was wearing was new, that kind of thing. He then moved into the importance of the whole dress for the job you want, not the job you have idea." Trini blew out a breath. I wasn't sure where he was going with this, because I always dress professionally. The other women at the table exchanged glances, and Nyla realized she wasn't the only one who feared where this was headed. Darren leaned slightly forward, his brows furrowed. Resting her hands on the table, Trini clasped them tightly together. He told me I was a beautiful woman, gave me all these compliments. Trini released an embarrassed laugh. Darren's face, in profile, appeared carved in granite. Nyla kept a tight hold on her rising temper on Trini's behalf. That had to be uncomfortable. I just sat there. I probably smiled, I don't know. Trini lifted her hands, let them fall helplessly back to the table. I didn't say anything. Offering a sympathetic smile, Nyla waited. As she'd told the others, this was Trini's story to tell, in her own time, in her own way. He moved to sit on the edge of his desk, real close to where I was seated. He never touched me, she said, as if knowing that was significant. His gaze dropped to my chest for just a second. Then he said I might get better deals for our clients if I let the vendors think I was hot to make a deal. Trini's lips tightened for a second. That's when I found my voice. I told him I had no intention of having sex with a vendor to get a better price or close a deal for a client. What did he say to that? Darren asked softly, but Nyla heard the edge in his voice. It was funny, really. He held up his hands, did the whole, whoa, who said anything about that? Acted like I'd blown what he'd said out of proportion. Trini's voice took on an earnestness. He made it sound as if I'd taken it wrong. But I didn't. I didn't take it wrong. Anger spurted through Nyla as a bleakness filled Trini's eyes. The silence once again stretched and extended as everyone held their breath. What happened then? Nyla finally asked. He got a phone call that he said he had to answer. Trini swallowed convulsively, then straightened and squared her shoulders. When I was walking out, he said something like, good talk. Oh, and that he could see me going far with the company. You should report him, Simone asserted. And say what? Trini's voice rose. That Jason complimented me? That he told me I took it wrong when he said I should let the vendors think I was hot to make a deal? Trini's gaze scanned the group, her chin lifted in a stubborn tilt. I didn't get it wrong, but I don't want to ruin my career by making a big deal out of nothing, especially since I'm just getting started. But Trini... Olivia's protest died when Trini shook her head. I won't do it, Trini insisted. I'm so sorry that happened to you, Nyla said. That is textbook sexual harassment, and I don't imagine that the company you work for would tolerate that kind of behavior from one of its executives. I agree, Darren said. Trini shook her head. I can't risk going over Jason's head and being told I'm overreacting. Something like that happened to me once, Amber began, and a discussion between the 5 women was off and running. As she listened, Nyla found herself sickened by how much these young women had already put up with. The talk had shifted to the importance of setting boundaries when Nyla's phone buzzed a 5-minute warning for the end of the meeting. Let's wrap it up, she told the group. Thank you, Nyla. The lost look had left Trini's eyes. I feel better, like I've got friends who have my back. You're not alone, Olivia assured her. You can count on us. Simone's dark eyes met Trini's. Whenever you need us, we'll be there for you. I hope you know that goes for Nyla and me, too, Darren told the young woman. Nyla and me. Just hearing Darren couple them together in such a casual way did crazy things to Nyla's heart, especially when she factored in that the intoxicating scent of Creed Aventus had been wreaking havoc on her senses since he'd first sat down. Nyla loved the way he smelled, the way he... Will we be here again next week? Olivia pushed back her chair and stood. Yes. Nyla made a quick note to herself to book the room. Look for an email from me tonight. If there's anything specific in your long-term goals you'd... Nyla stopped when the door pushed open. Her heart crashed against her ribcage when she saw her father standing there. Dressed in a charcoal suit with a pristine white shirt and maroon tie, Ross Driscoll looked every inch the massively successful businessman he was. His gaze swept the table, his brows slamming together like two dark thunderclouds when he saw Darren Flock sitting beside her. Nyla stood and swept out a hand. "Everyone, I'd like to introduce you to my father, Ross Driscoll, CEO of Velocity and owner of the Colorado Grizzlies." Nyla took her time introducing each of the women at the table. When she reached Darren, she kept her voice cool. "You already know Darren Flock, Dad. What you may not know is that Flock Inc. is behind this amazing mentoring program." Nyla's phone buzzed again. "That's it for today. Everyone have a wonderful week. I'll see you all next Wednesday." The women greeted her father on their way out of the conference room. He smiled and put on the charm. Darren followed them out, exchanging only a cool nod with her father. Once the sounds of the women talking faded, her father shut the door firmly and strode across the room to where Nyla stood, gathering up her papers. With hands that remained rock steady, she shoved the papers into her satchel and faced her father. Somehow, she even managed to put a smile on her face. "This is a nice surprise. What brings you by this evening?" "What was he doing here?" "Like I said, Flock Inc. is sponsoring this mentorship program. Darren is overseeing all the small groups. He stopped by to observe. My understanding is that he visits all 5 groups." Nyla's voice remained cool and under tight control. "It's not a problem. He doesn't interfere with the session." "I don't care if he interferes with the session or not. I don't like it that a flock is in my building. And what are you doing leading a group that's backed by Flock anyway?" "I didn't realize that Silver Creek was your personal building. When I asked Gran if the group could hold their weekly meetings here, she had no objections." "Did you tell her it's a Flock group?" "I told her that this mentoring program is a Flock initiative, but the women in the group have no ties to Flock. She gave me her blessing." "How did you even get involved in such a venture?" Her father's eyes, the same color as hers, flashed. "Doesn't your work with the Grizzlies keep you busy enough?" "It's called giving back, Dad." Nyla ignored the first question, hoping if she focused on the second, he'd forget. "These young women are first-generation college graduates. The person mentoring them had to drop out, so I agreed to do the last 4 weeks." She realized the mistake the instant the words left her mouth. All she'd done was circle the conversation back to how she'd gotten involved. "I can't believe someone from Flock thought you would be a good replacement." Nyla inched up her chin, her cheeks stinging as if she'd been slapped. "I'm an accomplished businesswoman with nearly a decade of experience. These young women are fortunate to have me mentoring them." And she, Nyla realized, was lucky to have them. The 2 sessions they'd had together had caused her to scrutinize her own personal and professional lives. "That came out wrong." Ross's tone gentled. "Of course you do an excellent job. What I meant was that this is a Flock initiative, so whoever contacted you about it should have known better." Nyla expelled a breath. It appeared her father wasn't interested in digging for the name of the actual person who'd called her about taking over the group. Perhaps this was her chance to test the waters, to see if there was any hope of ending the Driscoll-Flock feud. "This feud between the Flocks and the Driscolls has gone on for a long time." Nyla gave her shoulders a little shrug. "Don't you think it's time both families put it in the past?" The sharp look in her father's eyes punctured her balloon of hope. "The Driscolls have good reason to hate the Flocks." His eyes narrowed. "If you remember nothing else, remember this. Never trust a Flock." Chapter 6. Nyla told her father she needed to tidy the room before she left. Though she was certain there was staff to pick up the extra cookies, she didn't want to walk out with him. A deep sadness had settled around her shoulders, weighing her down. Any hope she'd had of her father accepting her relationship with Darren had been dashed. She covered the leftover cookies with some wraps she found in the drawer, then left them on the counter. The way she was feeling right now, if she took them home, she'd probably eat them all. When she turned to the door, she nearly groaned aloud. Now her brother was standing there. "Hey, JR, there's cookies here, if you want any." Nyla gestured with one hand. "I'm heading home. It's been a long day." JR made no move toward the cookies. He studied her for a long moment, concern etching his brow. "Did you and Dad have an argument?" Nyla thought about saying it was nothing, but she wanted her brother on her side if their dad mentioned the mentoring program to him. She gestured toward the chair. "Got a minute?" "Sure." He detoured to grab a cookie before taking a seat at the table, the same chair Darren had occupied not 10 minutes earlier. "I'm mentoring 5 first-generation college graduates. We meet once a week. Kayleen Leonard was leading the group, but had to have an emergency appendectomy. I've done 2 sessions, and there's 2 left." "I imagine you're a fantastic mentor." Puzzlement filled JR's eyes. "Does Dad have a problem with it?" "Well, he made some crack like, didn't I have enough to do with the Grizzlies to keep me busy?" "That's just him." JR waved a dismissive hand. Then his gaze turned sharp and assessing. "That can't be all." "It isn't all." Nyla told herself if she wanted her brother to champion her cause, he had to have most of the details. "The program is underwritten by Flock." JR's eyes widened ever so slightly before his expression hardened. "There's the issue." "And," Nyla added, "Darren Flock was here when Dad walked in on the group." JR's brows slammed together. "What was he doing here? I warned you he might be following—" Nyla raised her hand to stop her brother. "Please, not this again. Darren Flock is not following me. There are 5 mentoring groups in total. Darren observes each of them. Today he stopped by to see how mine was doing, because that is part of his role." JR rubbed his chin. "Dad definitely wouldn't like seeing Darren, or any Flock, on Driscoll property." "That's an understatement." Nyla gave a humorless laugh. "How is it for you?" "I don't understand." A chill coursed up Nyla's spine even as her voice remained even. "What are you asking?" "Does it make you uncomfortable, having Darren around?" "Not at all." She shrugged. "He doesn't really participate, though he may make a comment or two. Last week—" She realized her mistake almost instantly. "He was at your previous session as well?" "Only because it was my first week taking over from Kayleen." Once again, Nyla made sure her unease remained hidden. "When he mentioned he was coming up empty looking for an alternate place for the group to meet, I said I'd book a room at Silver Creek." "As long as he's not hassling you." JR's gaze searched her face. "Or making you uncomfortable." "Not at all. He's been a perfect gentleman." Nyla stood. She'd started work at 6 this morning. She still needed to review the emails she'd written for the individual group members one more time before she sent them. "I need to get home." "Are you still staying in the apartment off your office?" Nyla nodded. "I haven't had time to search for a place." "They have companies that can do that for you," JR reminded her. "Or have your PA do some of the initial legwork." "Claudia is my professional assistant, not my personal lackey. It's not her job to house hunt for me." "I'll get it done," Nyla told him. As he walked her out the door and down the hall to the stairwell, she realized something must have brought him to her. "Did you come looking for me?" "I want to thank you for being so nice to Britt. She told me how you took time to speak with her and agreed to be in the wedding. That means a lot to both of us." Nyla reached out, resting a hand on his sleeve. "JR, whatever my initial objection or fears may have been, I believe now that you two are a good match."
"We are."
JR grinned.
"I also have some good news to share."
"I could use some."
"I'm going to take over the running of Lexico."
Pride filled JR's voice. She knew this was what he'd hoped would happen when he'd spearheaded the acquisition of the tech company. "Congratulations!" Nyla surprised herself, and him, when she gave him a quick hug. I know how much you wanted the job.
New challenges, he chuckled. Keeps life interesting.
With all the changes in your life, I'd say interesting is an understatement. She paused, and her gaze met his. I'm happy for you. They took a few steps toward the door, and she paused. Who's taking your position at Velocity?
Cameron is coming back from London. He's flying in over the weekend.
I haven't seen him since Christmas. Nyla thought of their brother. Cam had been her buddy growing up, but as he'd gotten older, he'd become more serious and more difficult for her to read. They'd spoken at various Christmas get-togethers when he'd been home, but never about anything substantial. Is he dating anyone?
JR shrugged. Why do you ask?
Just wondering if there's anyone he'll be leaving behind.
He mentioned, Jean? A couple times?
JR pronounced the name in a horrible approximation of a French accent that made Nyla cringe.
But I don't think it was serious.
Isn't there a French model by that name? Nyla chuckled. It wouldn't surprise her if this woman and the model were one and the same. Dating a supermodel would be classic Cam. JR shrugged. Nyla smiled. It'll be nice having him back.
Gran wants everyone to get together for cocktails. A kind of welcome back Cam celebration.
No one said anything to me?
Last-minute decision.
JR waved a hand.
I said I'd let you know.
Nyla nodded. Give me the date and time. I'll be there.
Cam and Dad are really jazzed about the possibility of landing a deal with Ameline Rousseau.
JR followed her down the stairwell.
It'll be a huge coup if we can get her to endorse her own line of shoes. Our design team is already hard at work on prototypes.
They'd reached the first floor, and when they stepped out, he slung an arm around her shoulders.
If we do land her, it's all due to you.
Due to me? Nyla gave a little laugh. How do you figure?
The contact you made in Paris. When Cam called her and mentioned he was your brother, it opened a door.
Cam and his team opened the door. Nyla turned to JR. If they close this deal, they get the credit. Since JR was headed back to his penthouse, Nyla stepped out of Silver Creek alone. She stood there for a long moment under the glow of the streetlights. When she'd passed along Ameline's information to Cam, who headed Velocity's European division, the thought that it might circle back to her and Darren being in Paris together had seemed a distant possibility. If that happened, she'd just say she ran into Darren there. Which was true. It wasn't as if she'd gone there to be with him. She was supposed to be with Kendall. Nyla shook her head. What did it say that you could date someone for months and not even miss them when they were gone? Though it was a weekday, the sidewalks were filled with people. Nyla decided to walk a couple of blocks to clear her head before grabbing a cab. She'd barely gone a block when a man stepped out of a dark doorway. Her heart jumped, and she braced to run. At the last second, she recognized Darren. Bringing her hand to the front of her coat, she gave a laugh. You startled me.
I'm sorry. I wanted to talk to you, but I felt it best not to hang around outside the front of Silver Creek.
You always were a smart guy. When she started walking, he fell into step beside her. I'm sorry about my dad. I was as shocked as you to see him.
I didn't want to leave you.
You needed to go. It was easier for me to handle him without you there. He slanted a sideways glance.
How did it go?
Nyla lifted one shoulder, let it drop. My dad isn't happy, but I smoothed it over. He'd barely left when JR showed up.
What did JR think about me being there?
Her lips curved. JR is so happy with Britt and his new job that the Driscoll-Flock feud is low on his list.
What new job?
Nyla hesitated, then realized she wanted to share her family's good news with the man in her life. Plus, the deal was already signed, and if JR's appointment as CEO of Lexico hadn't made the media yet, it would in the next day or two. JR is going to head Lexico.
He'll be good at it.
Darren's gaze grew thoughtful.
And he'll be able to be his own man.
Darren paused in front of an ice cream shop that sported no customers. Not surprising, considering the hour and the cool temperature.
I'll buy you a cone.
Nyla rarely indulged in sweets, and never this late in the evening. "Live a little," a tiny voice in her head whispered. "One day, this, with Darren, will all come to an end." They got their cones, then sat at a table out of view of passers-by. The girl behind the counter had been more interested in her phone than in them.
"I wanted to give you something."
Darren kept his voice low, though the music blaring overhead likely prevented the girl from hearing anything they said, even if it was shouted. "Another gift?" She lifted the strawberry cone. "You already got me this." He smiled, slipped a hand into his coat pocket, and pulled out a key, setting it on the Formica tabletop. Picking it up, Nyla turned it over in her hand and lifted a questioning brow.
"To the cabin."
He blew out a breath.
"I want you to feel free to go there any time."
She held out her hand. "It's your home. I could never intrude."
"Please."
He curved her fingers around the key as his eyes remained on hers.
"It's our place. A sanctuary. I know you have your space off your office, but if you ever need more—"
"What if I show up and you're there with someone?" Puzzlement blanketed his face.
"Who would I be there with? No one else knows that I even have a cabin."
What if you brought another woman there?"
"Not happening."
His voice took on a firm edge.
"You're the only woman I want, and I keep the key."
Chapter 7. By the time Friday night rolled around, Nyla was exhausted. She hadn't realized how much Darren centered her until she didn't see him. Oh, they texted, but it wasn't the same. Still, she knew he was busy with a big project. He hadn't said what it was, and she hadn't asked. Meanwhile, the key to Darren's cabin was like a talisman in Nyla's pocket. She was toying with the idea of driving to the cabin that evening, but Britt invited her up to watch a movie with her and JR. Not wanting to be a third wheel, Nyla had started to decline when Britt mentioned that Miles would be there. An offer of pizza and spending time with a brother she adored proved too tempting an offer. Nyla knocked on the door to the penthouse, thinking how convenient it would be to live in the building, then decided it would be too much family, too close. The door opened, and Miles stood there. In a split second, she was engulfed in a bear hug. This brother, the lone Driscoll to remain in their hometown of Silver Creek, Colorado, didn't resemble anyone in the family. Tall, with the build of a linebacker, he had a beard and a mop of sandy-colored hair. His eyes were hazel, rather than blue, like those of the rest of his siblings. Big city life wasn't for him. When the family had moved to Denver, he'd moved with them, but as soon as he finished school, he'd return to the small town that would always be his home. "You're going to crush me!" She laughed the words. Miles offered a booming laugh, then released her. His big hands remained on her shoulders for several seconds as he studied her.
"You look happy. At least happier than the last time I saw you. Appears giving Kendall the boot was good for you."
"You got that right." She looped her arm through his. "What brought you here on a Friday night?"
"I wanted to meet JR's lady."
Miles turned and flashed a smile at Britt, who stood watching them with a smile on her face.
"I'm thinking she's a keeper."
"No thinking about it." JR appeared in the doorway, his hair still slightly damp from a shower. The ends of Britt's hair appeared to be wet as well. Nyla wondered if they'd been enjoying the shower together. The thought made her think of Darren. She wished he could be here with her now. She shoved the thought aside. There was no use wishing for what could never be. "I needed a relaxing evening." Nyla sniffed the air. "Unless my nose fails me, that smells like pizza from Denver Pizza Company. Where else?" JR shot a glance at his siblings.
"I've got some of that pale ale you both like."
While the Oscar-winning documentary Undefeated played on the big screen, the four of them ate pizza off paper plates, drank beer straight from the bottles, and talked. Nyla barely recognized JR. Her older brother had always seemed so serious. It was good to see him relax. And Miles? Heck, the guy was always chill. The movie was nearly over when she received a text from Trini. "Serious situation at work. I don't know what to do." Back against wall. Nyla knew it had to be serious for Trini to text her on a Friday night. Are you not able to walk away? Do you need me to call 911 for you? She texted back. Don't call 911, Trini texted. Nyla's fingers flew over the keys. Where are you? Brown Palace lobby. With my boss. Getting out of control. Relieved that Trini was in a public place, but not knowing how long she'd be safe, Nyla pushed to her feet. Duty calls. Do you have to leave now? Britt paused the movie. JR searched her face. What's wrong? She took a breath and quickly laid it out. I don't know what's going on, but I need to see what I can do to help her. I'm going with you. Miles stood, looking like a lumberjack in his plaid shirt, jeans, and boots. I'll come too, JR said, but Nyla shook her head. Stay. Nyla put her hand on JR's arm. If the three of us storm in there, we might cause a scene. Text us, Britt urged, as soon as you know anything, or if there's anything we can do to help. It's not far, but I'll call down and have a car waiting for you out front. Even as he spoke, JR reached for his phone. The driver can drop you off at the entrance. Good thinking. Thanks. Nyla quickly grabbed her bag and ushered Miles out the door. JR had timed it perfectly. The car was waiting for them when they reached the main floor. In a matter of minutes, the driver dropped them off at the Brown Palace. The stately hotel was one of Nyla's favorites, with its ornate dark wood and stained glass. On the main floor, most of the tables and sofas where they served high tea were now occupied with workers in the area celebrating the end of the week. Miles should have stuck out like a sore thumb in his clothes, but the guy had a presence that commanded respect. Do you see her? Miles spoke softly as Nyla scanned the room. It took Nyla a second. Straight across the room, then to the left. She's the blonde, sitting on the sofa. The one with Mr. Navy suit, who keeps trying to move closer? That's the one. His name is Jason. Nyla pasted a smile on her lips. Follow my lead. Nyla wove her way through the tables, her gaze darting right and left as if on the hunt for a place to sit. When she got close to Trini, she widened her eyes. Trini! This is such good luck! Nyla injected extra surprise into her voice. I texted you that Miles was in town because I know you two wanted to get together, but you didn't text back. For a second, a blank look filled her eyes, but it was gone so quickly that if Nyla hadn't been looking right at her, she'd never have seen it. I'm so sorry. Trini turned to Miles. Forgive me? One thing Nyla could say about her brothers, they were all, as Pops would say, quick on the draw. If Jason thought Miles was Trini's boyfriend, that might be a good thing. Always. Miles offered the young woman a heart-stopping smile. I'm Nyla. Nyla held out her hand to Jason, deliberately leaving off her last name. She gestured with her head toward her brother. This is Miles. When the man, who couldn't have been more than 40, only took her hand without saying anything, Nyla pushed. You are? Jason Greeley. He studied Nyla with pale blue eyes. You look familiar. Jason is my immediate supervisor at work. Nerves had Trini's voice trembling. I'm sorry, Justin, Nyla began. Jason, he corrected with a scowl. Ah, yes, Jason. Nyla fluttered a hand in the air, then turned to Trini. I'm afraid we need to leave now. Miles turned to Trini and held out a hand. Everyone is waiting. They didn't give anyone, including Trini, a chance to ask who was waiting or where. Miles merely took Trini by the arm and escorted her out of the bar and to the waiting car. In the back of the limo, Trini stared wide-eyed at the luxurious interior. Where are we going? And who are we meeting? To Silver Creek, unless you have a better thought. That works. Trini leaned her head back against the seat. Actually, anywhere away from Jason works. Your text had a desperate feel. Nyla studied the girl. Probably because I was feeling desperate. Trini slanted a glance at Miles. If you guys were out on a date, I'm sorry to drag. A snort came from Miles, followed by a chuckle.
She's my sister.
Trini offered a tentative smile. Good to know.
You didn't interrupt anything, Nyla said firmly.
Okay.
Trini let out a shuddering breath. Tell me what happened. Nyla didn't want the conversation to get sidetracked.
Jason left for a minute to get more drinks. According to him, the server wasn't being attentive.
Trini met Nyla's gaze.
That's when I texted you. I didn't know who else to contact.
You mentioned your back being against the wall. Nyla kept her tone conversational. What did you mean by that?
I didn't want to go to that hotel with him after work, but he insisted he had important job-related things to discuss with me.
Trini shrugged.
I was worried. What could he have to say to me that could be so important he didn't want to say it in the office? I need this job. Keeping it is very important to me.
The last comment she directed in Miles's direction, as if wanting him to understand. Got it, was all he said.
When we got here, he ordered us both a drink. Then another.
Trini hesitated.
I asked him why I was here. He started saying all these things about how he likes the way I look, that he can tell I have a really good figure and wonders why I don't wear more form-fitting clothes.
Trini gave a dry chuckle.
Just like that day in his office, I tried to laugh it off. I asked him again why he needed to speak with me. He told me to stay put. He'd get us another round of drinks. There was something in his eyes tonight, something in the way he looked at me.
Trini shivered, just remembering. What happened then?
I texted you, and when he came back, he said he had a great opportunity for me, that he could tell I really wanted to get ahead.
Trini's voice went hard.
He said if I went with him to his house tonight, he'd make sure I got hired once my probationary period was up. All I had to do was be nice to him.
Miles mumbled a curse.
Trini smiled. Totally agree.
Nyla leaned forward. How did you respond?
You showed up. That's why he was so pissed. Trini's eyes turned dark and intense. I want this job. I need it. But I won't prostitute myself for it. I just didn't know what to do or say. When he started plying me with drinks, I knew where the conversation was headed. I don't have trouble saying no to guys. He's different.
He's in a position of power.
He is.
The limo pulled up in front of Silver Creek. Nyla looked at the crowds of people in the main-level bar and restaurant. Then she looked back at Trini. What would you say to just driving around for a while, until we get this figured out?
Trini's face brightened. I'd like that.
I wouldn't mind riding along.
Miles hesitated.
But if you'd prefer to discuss this alone, I can get out now.
Please stay. Trini met his gaze. I really appreciate you playing along to help me out. And as a guy, I'd like your input as well.
Nyla notified the driver to simply drive around until told otherwise. I'm glad we were able to help. Nyla offered a supportive smile. You found a way to extricate yourself from the situation. Why didn't you just get up and leave? Miles asked. To Nyla's surprise, Trini appeared to take the question seriously.
I thought about it, but I didn't want to make him angry.
Because of the job. Miles stroked his beard. You thought he'd hold it against you.
He would hold it against me,
she insisted, leaning forward, her expression earnest.
He probably still will.
But you were in a public place. It's unlikely that he would start yelling at you in a public place, right? The puzzled expression on Miles's face remained.
He was a guy,
Nyla reminded herself, as irritation surged. He didn't understand that some men didn't care about that.
I didn't want to make him angry because of work,
Trini clarified. It's natural, after stressful situations, to look back and second-guess every move you made. Nyla offered Trini a supportive smile.
Trini sighed. I'm just not sure where to go from here.
There are several options. It seems the first option would be to tell Jason you're not interested in a romantic relationship and that you would prefer to never speak of the topic again. When Trini began shaking her head, Nyla continued. If you don't want to bring the topic up to him, you could let HR know. Once again, Trini shook her head. That's a step you need to at least consider. Not only shouldn't he be allowed to get away with such actions, he could go to HR and turn it around on you. He could say you came onto him, offering sexual favors for a good evaluation. Trini's eyes went wide. Do you think he'd do that? I think anyone who would pressure you for sex would lie about anything. Nyla wasn't about to pull any punches. Right now, you have Miles and I to vouch that you reached out to us when you were troubled by what he was suggesting. Driscolls carry a lot of weight in this community. Trini appeared to shrink back against the seat cushions. I don't want to get anyone in any trouble. You aren't getting anyone in trouble. His actions are the problem, not anything you've done. Miles's voice turned hard as steel. Since he propositioned you, he's likely done the same thing before to other women, and he'll likely do it again. You're right. Trini straightened her shoulders. I'll go to HR first thing Monday morning. Nyla gave an approving nod. I think it's the right course of action, not only for you, but for the association you work for. They need to know this is going on. You're a strong woman. Miles leaned forward and looked Trini straight in the eyes. Remember that he is in the wrong, not you. Chapter 8. On Monday, Nyla sat on one of the benches in Union Park next to her brother Cameron, eating a hot dog. The day was unusually mild, which meant the food trucks were doing a booming business. College-age students were tossing frisbees, and couples held hands as they strolled down the wide walkway between the trucks, deciding what to have for lunch. That could be her and Darren, Nyla thought with a pang, knowing even as the thought surfaced that it was simply wishful thinking. That could never be her and Darren. And Ameline? Nyla refocused her attention on her brother. He'd grown into a man during the 6 years he'd spent in London after college. Cam even looked the part of the successful businessman, with his dark hair cut stylishly short and his self-assured manner. The expensive tweed coat completed the image. What about Ameline? Is she the reason you stopped by my office unannounced? A dark brow winged up. Isn't wanting to see my beloved sister reason enough? No. He laughed. You haven't changed a bit. Same old Nyla. He was wrong, she thought. She had changed. She was still changing. The realization was terrifying. I want to speak with you about Ameline Rousseau. My team and I will be meeting with her on Thursday. If it works for you, you're welcome to join us. Nyla shifted uncomfortably on the bench. Is it necessary I be there? No. Puzzlement filled his gaze. But since you made the initial contact, I thought you'd want to be there. It was as she'd thought, an invitation that he felt he had to make. I'll try to make it if I can. Tell me everything you know about Ameline. Cameron turned in his seat to face her. Unlike JR's eyes, which were a clear blue, Cam's had gold flecks. I'm not talking about her tennis titles or personal life. We have all that data. Of course they had the data. You didn't offer someone a multi-million-dollar endorsement deal without making sure you knew the person you were dealing with. I assume you made sure there are no skeletons. Cam made a sound that would translate to an eye roll if it were an action. You mean, did we make sure she doesn't have a temper that could cause her to hit a line judge with a ball or fling her racket when a match doesn't go her way? Give me some credit. Did you find anything along those lines? Nyla didn't know why she was deliberately delaying the discussion about her encounter with Ameline. She certainly would have to get to it before lunch was over. The only thing we learned is that she can be a bit temperamental. Things set her off. Common things. Not stuff on the court. Which means you'll have to tread lightly in the negotiations. Dealing with temperamental artists and athletes is my specialty. Cam smiled. Now, tell me about that encounter. Don't spare the details. The only detail Nyla spared was that Darren Flock had also been present. She couldn't imagine it would come up in a business meeting, and knowing about it would only stress out the entire family. Thanks for the information. Cam sat back. I'm not sure any of it matters, but this will be a major deal. I don't want anything to go wrong. Is she entertaining any other offers that you know of? Nyla asked. Not that I'm aware of. Cam tapped a couple of fingers against his thigh, his gaze turning serious. She's always resisted doing these endorsements, though God knows why. It's like free money in the bank. Cam rose to his feet. We're meeting in the Georgetown room at the Brown Palace. Nyla pulled her brows together. You're not meeting on home turf? She's staying at the Brown Palace while she's in town. That's where she wants to meet. So, that's where we'll be. Thursday, 10 a.m. Nyla inclined her head. Are you sure you don't need me there? I can't imagine it'll make a difference. But, like I said, if you want to come, you're certainly welcome. Nyla only smiled. She'd let JR know Ameline might be open to an endorsement deal. It was up to her brothers to make the deal happen. Nyla realized as she met with her mentees on Wednesday night that she was going to miss them. Only one more session after this, and their time would be over. Everyone had already gathered by the time Nyla strolled through the door 5 minutes early. They were congregated around a platter of muffins, talking in loud, excited voices. From the few words she heard, Nyla could tell it wasn't the food that had them excited. Trini turned. Her face brightened when she saw Nyla, and she lifted her hand in a little wave. Nyla knew, because Trini had called her on Monday to tell her, that she'd gone to HR and relayed her story. When Trini had left that meeting, she'd been surprised to see Jason stroll through the doors. She'd told Nyla she had no idea if he'd been summoned or had come on his own. The only thing she knew was that she was glad she'd shared her experience. That was the last contact Nyla had had with her. Grab a muffin, if you want, and something to drink, and take your seats. Nyla sat in her familiar chair. She glanced to her right, wondering if Darren would make an appearance today. She had a feeling he wouldn't. He was involved in some big project at work, and even their texting this week had been sporadic. We have a lot to cover, so let's get started. Nyla glanced at her tablet. This week, we've all heard about Trini's experience with that jerk of a supervisor, Olivia interrupted. We were wondering if this week we could deviate from the agenda and instead discuss what happens when you trust the wrong person. You know, is this person you're working beside a friend or a foe? It's often difficult to ascertain someone's true nature, Amber interjected. It's important to know. Simone's comment had the others nodding agreement. As the topic appeared important to the group, Nyla didn't hesitate. Okay, after our meditation, we'll move into learning to recognize workplace adversaries. Everyone okay with that? They all nodded as Amber queued up what had quickly become Nyla's favorite part of each session, the 10-minute meditation. She opened her eyes at the end and let her gaze drift around the table. Olivia, would you care to start the discussion? Like I said, we were discussing Trini's experience with Jason. I'm glad he got fired. Amber's eyes blazed. Stupid jerk, Katie agreed. So, Jason had been terminated. That spoke well for the association where Trini worked, Nyla thought. Though curious about how that had all gone down, she could speak with Trini and get the details later. Anyway, Nyla prompted, her focus returning to Olivia. When the 5 of us were talking, we realized we've all faced similar issues. A chill traveled up Nyla's spine. She knew sexual harassment happened, but for all of these young women to be... Olivia laughed and pointed. You should see your face. The scowl Nyla shot her had Olivia's laughter dying. We didn't mean that we've all been propositioned, Olivia hastened to explain. Why don't you tell us what you did mean? Nyla narrowed her gaze. I was referring to not being able to tell if someone is a friend or an adversary. Take me, for example. Olivia puffed out her cheeks. When I started my new job, everyone was standoffish, except for one woman. She was helpful and friendly, even inviting me to lunch that first day. Last week, one of the others told me that I need to be careful around Angela, that she's a troublemaker and a backstabber. I have something similar, though not exactly the same, occurring where I work. Simone shook her head. There's this one guy who goes out of his way to diss me. He appears to revel in pointing out every little thing I don't know. Last week, I'd finally had enough. I told him, hey, I'm new here, and I'm learning as fast as I can. I discovered he'd wanted my job, but they hired me instead. Knowing that explains a lot. The people I work with, Katie admitted, are all friendly and seem nice, but I don't really know them. I'm not sure who I can trust. I trusted Jason. Trini's brow furrowed. He seems like an okay guy, until he wasn't. We're worried, Olivia admitted. These are our first professional positions. We don't want to screw it up by trusting the wrong person. What if someone we think is a friend is really a foe? Nyla gathered her thoughts. The scenarios you're describing happen every day, in every kind of workplace. Even Trini's experience, sadly, is more common than it should be. I want to be a team player, Simone asserted, but I can't afford to get blindsided by a coworker I thought was a friend. Let me give you an example that may help, Nyla said. A friend went through a divorce. She wanted to make the marriage work, but her husband was a real ass. A couple years later, he came to her, insisting he'd changed. Nyla shook her head. They started dating, everything was wonderful, and he started pressing her to let him move back in. He seemed different, but she worried he hadn't really changed. Her therapist told her to take it slow, told her a person is usually incapable of sustaining an act for a long period of time. After about 3 months, he reverted back to being an ass. Olivia rubbed her chin, her dark eyes thoughtful. If I'm making the correlation, you're suggesting we wait to see how things play out. Nyla nodded. What about being a team player? Simone asserted. There's nothing that says you have to be friends with those on your team, Katie piped up. Exactly right. Nyla offered an approving nod. Being friendly and being friends are two different things. So, you're suggesting that we give it, say, 6 months to scope out the lay of the land before getting too chummy with anyone? Trini cocked her head. Is that right? Nyla considered. There will be people you instantly click with, whom you'll be tempted to share everything with. What I'm suggesting is you take it slow. Confiding in the wrong person could have serious ramifications. The discussion continued, and the ease with which the group members shared information and concerns told Nyla they'd bonded during the past weeks. She'd be sad when their time together ended. As she walked out the door with them, flicking off the lights, she realized the discussion had left her with an uneasy feeling. What if she was wrong about Darren? What if he was using her? But for what? She thought. How could he be using her when they didn't even discuss business? No, she didn't have anything to worry about with Darren. With her family? Yes. If they found out, there would be hell to pay. Kendall had ended up being a climber, something she hadn't seen initially, yet her instincts had told her she couldn't fully trust him. Still, she'd trusted him enough to plan a trip to Paris with him. She shoved the thoughts aside, told herself she was just feeling out of sorts because Darren hadn't shown up tonight. Despite telling herself he was unlikely to return to Silver Creek after the episode with her father, she looked forward to seeing his smile every Wednesday. Fingering the key in her pocket, she found herself yearning for the quiet and solitude of the cabin. Hadn't he told her she could go there whenever she wanted? Her spirits gave a leap as she made her decision. She could stop by the office, pack an overnight bag, and be on the road in 30 minutes. Another 45 minutes, and she'd be at the cabin. Even if Darren wasn't there, she could relax in the hot tub and let the tension drift away. She couldn't imagine a better way to end the day. Nyla found the cabin dark, but told herself it was what she'd expected. She started a fire in the hearth, hung up her clothes for tomorrow after texting her PA she'd be in late. She didn't have any meetings scheduled until the afternoon. For now, she would sip her glass of wine, sit in the hot tub, and chill. When she finally went to sleep, she wouldn't set the alarm.
You look so enticing in the moonlight.
The voice had Nyla jolting upright. Darren! I didn't expect to see you.
I didn't plan to come, but this week has been hectic.
Mine too. You're just what I need. The words came out on a breath. The stress gripping Nyla's shoulders fell away in the warmth of his smile.
I missed seeing you this week.
While he talked, he started stripping, starting with his suit coat, then his tie.
How was the mentoring session tonight?
It was good.
Just good?
He slid into the water beside her. You should have gotten a glass of wine, she said, feeling suddenly shy.
If I want any, I can share yours.
He smiled, and her heart melted.
Right now, there's only one thing I want.
She inclined her head and smiled, liking the impish gleam in his eyes. And what would that be? With one finger, he pushed back a damp strand of hair from her cheek.
To kiss you.
Seconds later, his mouth devoured hers. He wasn't the only one who wanted, who needed. Nyla slid her fingers into his hair and then arched back. Had she ever known such want, such need, such love? It struck her then, like a bolt from the sky, that she loved Darren Flock. Not just a little either, a lot. Because O'Driscoll never did anything halfway, including love. They moved from the hot tub to the rug in front of the fire. She emitted a deep, satisfied sigh. I don't want you to move. I'd be happy to stay like this forever. The second the words left her mouth, she wished she could pull them back. They'd never spoken of anything more than the here and now. What was she doing, acting as if they could have a relationship?
Me too.
He brushed her cheeks with his lips.
I was wound up tight on the drive here. Now I feel like I could sleep for days.
Do you have to be up early? Nyla tried to keep the hope from her voice. If he planned to go into the office late, they could spend the morning together. Enjoy the...
I do. What about you?
I might as well go in early, too. She sighed. I plan to take the morning off, but what's the point?
The point is you're allowed to make time for yourself.
He kissed her gently.
Sure, if there's an important meeting or deadline, you have to be responsible. But if that's not the case, there's no harm in taking a morning off.
Nyla thought about Cam's meeting with Ameline. Cam had said it wasn't imperative she be there. Heck, she'd probably be in the way. No, the meeting at the Brown Palace, the only possible item on her morning calendar, wasn't a reason to rush back to the city. Darren stood and held out a hand. She took it, and he pulled her up. His gaze searched hers.
I wish I didn't have to leave early, and that's the truth of it.
Duty calls.
How does a shower and bed sound to you?
With you or solo? He grinned and took her hand.
No more solo.
Chapter 9. Darren was gone by the time Nyla rolled out of bed at 9. She glanced at her phone, charging on the nightstand. Last night she'd turned it off so she could fully recharge this morning without endless calls and texts disturbing her. She took her time, foraging in the refrigerator for some yogurt, pouring a cup of the coffee he'd made before he left that morning. By the time she reached her office, it was noon. She and Darren had spoken of getting together that evening, but only in the most general of terms. She smiled when she pushed open the door to enter what she thought of as Grizzly's HQ. Miss Driscoll. Claudia shot to her feet. You... Let me get settled, then we'll go over this afternoon's schedule. Her PA was sputtering when Nyla stepped into her office. She immediately saw what Claudia had been trying to tell her. Her father, JR and Cameron sat, conversing in low tones, in what she thought of as her visitors' area. Nyla smiled, trying to ignore the strange vibe in the air. "This is a nice surprise."
"There you are, finally."
Her father pulled to his feet, his blue eyes pinning her.
"Where have you been?"
"Good morning to you, too." Nyla moved to where her brother still sat, took a seat, and crossed one leg over the other.
"It's not morning," her father snapped. "It's noon."
"Thanks for the update on the time." Nyla had arrived at the office in an exceptionally good mood, but the glow was fading fast. "I sense a problem."
"The meeting with Ameline."
Cameron met her gaze.
"She wasn't pleased you weren't there."
JR gave a harsh-sounding laugh.
"That just might be the understatement of the year. Why weren't you there?"
her father demanded.
"You knew how important this account was to us."
Nyla wondered if Cam had mentioned their discussion. She met his gaze. In answer to her unspoken question, Cam said,
"I told Dad I invited you, but I didn't think you were needed. We'll have a talk about that later."
Ross glared at Cameron. Nyla realized she wasn't the only one on the hot seat.
"I did mention Ameline has a reputation for being temperamental."
Cam's tone remained even, and he didn't glance in his father's direction.
"Apparently, she took you not being there as a personal affront. Especially," JR's eyes narrowed, "since Darren was there, along with his team."
Why would Darren have been at Velocity's meeting with Ameline? A knot began to form in the pit of Nyla's stomach.
"Since she'd met the two of you together in Paris," her father said, "him being there was a huge plus for Flock, while you missing the meeting was a big red X in the Velocity column."
A muscle in his jaw jumped.
"What were you doing in Paris with Darren Flock?"
"I was supposed to be there with Kendall, remember?" Nyla kept her face and voice expressionless. "When he bailed at the last minute, I went alone."
"Ameline said you and Darren were together."
Her father was like a dog with a bone, but she understood. This account was big, multi-million-dollar big. "We ran into each other at the hotel. He was there on business, or maybe it was for some conference. I'm not sure." Nyla waved a hand as if she'd been too uninterested to ask. "I needed to eat. He needed to eat. We sat at a sidewalk cafe. The tables were close together. Ameline was at the next table."
"You never mentioned Darren Flock when you told me about the discussion with Ameline."
The recrimination in Cameron's eyes tore at her heart.
"Did you know Flock was going after her?"
Nyla shook her head. "I didn't." But why didn't she assume? Velocity and Flock Inc. were rivals, and Darren was no dummy when it came to business. Of course he would have been interested in pursuing an endorsement deal with Ameline. He'd given the tennis star his card, after all. Then another thought struck her as she remembered how he'd encouraged her to spend the morning at the cabin. Had he suggested that on purpose, so she'd miss the meeting with Ameline?
"She chose Flock. Didn't even want to see the figures we pulled together."
Cameron shook his head.
"Who does that?" "We knew she could be unpredictable," JR reminded his brother. "We didn't know Flock was involved."
Her father's eyes turned cold. Nyla nearly shivered as he directed that icy blast in her direction.
"Tell me what's going on between you and that Flock boy."
When Nyla opened her mouth, not sure what she would say, her father held up a hand.
"Think very carefully before you speak, Nyla Jean. I won't tolerate more lies."
"I never lied to you, Dad," Nyla protested.
"You didn't tell me about being with a Flock."
Her father's eyes remained ice cold.
"Might as well have lied."
Her brothers exchanged glances, but remained silent. Nyla was grateful. Going toe-to-toe with one Driscoll was all she could handle at the moment. "My back is against the wall." The thought gave her a jolt. What had she said to Trini when she'd said the same? That there were always choices, sometimes with consequences, but a person always had a choice. Not a coward, Nyla told herself. She lifted her chin and met her father's penetrating gaze with a steady one of her own. First of all, it's not my fault that none of you knew that Flock would be involved in the meeting this morning. It wasn't my meeting. I never agreed to attend, and it had nothing to do with what I do for this family. I'm in charge of operations for the Grizzlies, not Velocity. So how is it my fault that someone else withheld the information that Velocity and Flock would be competing for a deal with Ameline? I tipped you off that she might be in the market for an endorsement deal, and that's where my involvement ended. Oh, and while we're on the subject of the Flocks, I'm in love with Darren Flock. Deal with it. Her father had an excellent poker face, very useful in business, but his widened eyes and stunned expression told Nyla she'd surprised him. Anger followed on the heels of surprise. His dark brows slammed together like two thunderclouds ready to rumble. His hands, with their carefully manicured nails, clenched into fists at his sides. "You love a flock?" His shouted words reverberated off the walls of the quiet room. "Are you crazy?" "Dad." JR put a hand on his father's coat sleeve. "Calm down." Ross whirled on his eldest son. "Don't you tell me to calm down. You heard what she said." "Let's all take a breath," Cameron said, but the look he shot Nyla was one of disapproval rather than support. Ross shook off JR's hold and refocused on his daughter. "You're a disgrace to the Driscoll name." Nyla fought for control as her heart fluttered like 1,000 butterflies in her chest. She knew her father loved her, and she loved him. They would get through this. He was a reasonable man. She could make him see reason. What happened with the Flocks was a long time ago. They try to steal our business every chance they get, luring away our designers with money and promises. Ross spat the words. Now they're luring away my children. Darren didn't lure. Her father took a menacing step forward. Don't you say his name in my presence. We lost a mega deal today because of you. Did he tell you to stay away? Ross gave a harsh laugh. Are you so desperate for someone to love you that you do whatever a man wants? His words had heat rising to Nyla's cheeks, the skin stinging as if he'd slapped her. Don't you talk to me like that. I'll talk to you however I want. Instead of beginning to calm, her father reminded her of a locomotive gathering steam, ready to plow over anyone in its path, including a daughter he professed to love. I can't trust you. I don't want you in any part of my business. You're out. Nyla's heart rate turned erratic, and she fought for breath. You don't mean that. I can't have someone I don't trust in charge of my team. Her father's face hardened until it reminded her of a Grecian statue. You're done. Clear out your office and do it quickly. I'm removing your network access first thing tomorrow. Dad. JR stood. You're going too far. Don't do this, Dad. Cameron surged to his feet to stand beside his brother. There are other stars we can approach. Losing Ameline hurts, but we'll find someone even better. Ross shook his head and shot his son a pitying glance. Don't you understand? It's not about the account. It's about having a daughter I don't trust. Tears stung the backs of Nyla's eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She never cried. She was tough, as tough as her brothers. She'd fought her whole life to foster that image, and she wasn't about to give in to emotion now. Nyla stared her father straight in the eyes, this man who'd taught her to play chess and ride a bike. If that's how you want it. It's how it has to be, he stubbornly insisted. Picking up her satchel, Nyla slung the strap over her shoulder and walked out on the only life and family she had. It took Nyla longer than she wanted to clear her belongings out of the apartment adjacent to her office. JR and Cam had tried to talk to her after their father stormed out, but she told them to go away. As she sorted through desk drawers, she was careful not to take anything that might belong to the company. Wouldn't want dear old Dad to charge me with theft. The thought had a knot forming in her throat. At this point, she wouldn't put it past him. Though she wanted nothing more than to sling her luggage into the trunk of her car and drive away, there were a number of business items she needed to address. Delegation under duress, Nyla thought, as she sent the last email. Funny that it took something like this to make her realize just how much of what she'd taken on over the years could be delegated. She loved the Grizzlies organization. Locking her out of the network, while prudent, was unnecessary. Regardless of what her father believed, she would never do anything to harm any part of the organization. The lights would automatically shut off once they detected no movement, but the act of flipping the switch seemed a type of closure. Goodbye. A lump rose to her throat, and she hesitated for a moment in the outer office before turning off the lights and wheeling her bags into the hall. As she rode down the elevator to the parking level, she thought how happy she'd been this morning, how hopeful she'd been about the future. How foolish. It wasn't until she'd loaded her bags and slid behind the wheel of the SUV that she realized she didn't have a clue where to go. A ping sounded, and she pulled her phone from her bag. Ross told me what happened. What can I do to help? Gran. The text had the emotion she was trying to keep under tight control rising up. Once again, Nyla tamped it down. She would not pit her grandmother against her dad. I love you, Gran. I'll be in touch. When Nyla pulled out of the parking garage, she didn't have a plan. She had money and credit cards. She was not without resources. Back against the wall. As she drove aimlessly, Nyla thought about the discussion she and the women in the mentoring group had had about how to know if someone was friend or foe. She'd given her heart to Darren. What if she was wrong? What if he'd simply been using her? No, she thought. That made no sense. Using her for what? The endorsement deal was in the works regardless of their relationship, and since they'd made the pact not to discuss business, it was logical that he wouldn't have mentioned the deal or the meeting to her. As for him manipulating her to spend her morning at the cabin, she further surmised, he wouldn't have had any reason to think that her attendance would be required at the meeting with Ameline. She worked for the Grizzlies, not Velocity. Plus, he hadn't even known she would be at the cabin when he showed up and found her there. If he'd intended to manipulate her into skipping the meeting, wouldn't he have made plans with her to ensure he had the opportunity to suggest she take the morning off? Still, the thought nagged at her. How did you know for sure that someone liked you, loved you? All her life, she'd guarded her heart, never letting anyone get too close. Never knowing who might sell some story about her to the media, never knowing if someone was friends with her only because of what she could do for them. It hadn't been like that with Darren. At least, it hadn't felt that way. Had she only been kidding herself, seeing what was there because she wanted it so badly? Another ping of her phone, and the message came up on the screen. She pushed the button, and the voice assistant said, "Message from Britt Appleton. I'm in your corner. So is JR. How can I help?" Firing Britt was something Nyla regretted. Never more than now. The laugh she uttered caught on a sob. Keeping a tight hold on her rioting emotions, Nyla cleared her throat. Hey, Siri, send message to Britt Appleton. Thanks, period. I'll be in touch, period. Once her message was confirmed, she had it sent. Just knowing the entire family hadn't turned against her somehow eased some of her pain. Without realizing it, Nyla found herself turning the vehicle in the direction of the cabin. Darren had said she was welcome any time. It was time to find out if he meant what he'd said. Darren pulled into the drive beside the cabin and breathed a sigh of relief. He'd texted Nyla several times, but hadn't received a response. By now, she had to know the outcome of the Ameline Rousseau deal, and that her not being at the meeting had been the deciding factor in Flock being chosen. Though Darren had been careful not to say anything about their time together in Paris, Ameline had given that info up 5 minutes into the meeting. For Cameron Driscoll, hearing that Darren and Nyla had been in Paris having dinner together had been like waving a red flag in front of a bull.
If looks could kill, Cameron would have put Darren 6 feet under right then and there. Darren's brother Gavin had been equally shocked at the news and had confronted him after the meeting. But Gavin had been easy to redirect. After all, Ameline had just signed on the dotted line, even if she'd proceeded on the basis of pique rather than sound business logic. She wasn't the first athlete, heck, the first person, to let emotions overrule common sense. Still, Flock would do right by her. Darren thought of the shoes he and the design team had been working on for her. No, Ameline Rousseau would be very happy she'd gone with Flock. He'd just have felt better if Ameline had chosen Flock based on something other than being irked that Nyla Driscoll had not been at the meeting. Seeing Nyla's SUV parked in the cabin's driveway had Darren pushing out the breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He opened the door and barely refrained from calling out, "I'm home." That's how he felt as he walked inside, as if he'd come home, not just to this cabin, but to Nyla. She appeared in the doorway to the kitchen, dressed as casually as he'd ever seen her, in leggings and a maroon tunic. He strolled over to her, but she turned her face away from his kiss. Darren tried to ignore the alarm skittering up his spine. "What's wrong?" She met his gaze. "Did you purposely try to talk me out of going to the meeting?" "You know better." Seeing the hurt and confusion in her eyes, Darren fought to keep his tone even. "You suggested I take the morning off," she reminded him. "I didn't suggest you stay home." It hurt that she could for even 1 second believe he'd do that to her. "I encouraged you after you'd already decided. I had no idea that you being at that meeting would matter. If I had known, I'd have said." She raked a hand through her hair and blew out a breath, her blue eyes as cloudy as a windswept day. "She doesn't believe me." "I need air." Darren strode through the house to the back porch. He gripped the railing and tried to steady the fear rising inside him. What if he couldn't make her understand that she meant more to him than any business deal ever could? Would this be the end of their relationship? Darren clenched his jaw so tightly a muscle jumped. The back door opened, and Nyla moved to his side. "Darren, Stop." Turning to face her, he held up a hand. "For weeks now, I've been trying to prove to you that we can work. No maybe about it. Yet at our first real challenge, you're quick to believe the worst about me. Believe the same nonsense our families have been spouting for decades." She took a step closer. "That isn't true. It's time to face the fact that nothing I've tried has been enough for you. And so I can think of only one remaining option. I'll quit my job. I'll give up the Ameline account and my position with Flock Inc. to prove that I love you above all else. I won't lose the woman I love over a business deal." A look of startled surprise crossed her face. "I'll even find a way to shift the deal to Velocity. I don't know how, but I promise I'll find a way." He grasped her hands, finding her fingers ice cold. "I love you, Nyla. No deal is worth losing you." Chapter 10. Nyla's heart swelled. The tears she never shed, the ones she kept ruthlessly in check, slipped down her cheeks. "You'd do that? Give up a multi-million-dollar deal for me?" "I'd do anything for you." The hands holding hers squeezed more tightly. "I love you." "I love you too." Nyla sniffled, but kept her gaze on his. "But you don't need to quit your job. Flock won the account fairly." "I never thought Ameline would care if you were there. If I'd known, I'd have said something to you. I swear I would have." "I never guessed she'd take me not being there as a slight." Nyla shook her head. Pulling her hands from his, she swiped at her cheeks. "Sorry, I don't normally cry. It's just been a hellish day." "I wish I'd had a chance to warn you." He expelled a breath. "It was obvious your family was shocked that we'd had dinner together in Paris." "Think of how they'd feel if they knew we were sleeping together the entire 2 weeks I was in Paris. And since." Nyla's laugh pitched high.
though I'm sure they know that now, since I told them I love you." A warmth flared in his brown eyes. "You told them?" "I couldn't keep it a secret anymore."
How did they take it?
Concern filled his voice. "Badly." Fresh tears spouted. "My dad fired me, told me to pack my things and go." Darren's eyes widened in horror.
He did not.
"He did." Nyla shrugged. "So much for unconditional love."
Oh, Nye.
Darren wrapped his arms around her.
I'm so sorry.
She laid her head against his chest and, for the first time in her life, let herself completely lean on someone. "Me too." They stood there for several long seconds, giving and receiving comfort.
I want you to stay here,
he told her before she could ask.
When I gave you the key and said I want you to consider this your home, I meant it.
"Thank you. I'm going to take a few days to consider my options, then—"
Even when you know what you want to do, I don't want you to go. You and I, we belong together. It was true when we were 17, and it's true now."
Stepping back, he tilted her chin up with the curve of his finger. His intense gaze met hers.
Please, Nyla, no matter what happens with your family, don't say goodbye to me. I want to build a life with you.
A tentative smile tugged at her lips as her heart flip-flopped. "What are you saying, Darren?"
Marry me, Nyla.
He brushed a lock of hair back with gentle fingers.
I love you. You love me? What are we waiting for?
Nyla married Darren Flock in a simple outdoor ceremony 2 days later, with a retired judge officiating. The fact that neither of them had any family present made it both easier and more difficult. Nyla wished her family could have been there to watch her marry the man she loved. She knew Gran would have come if she'd asked, but she hadn't wanted to put her grandmother at odds with her grandfather, who definitely wouldn't approve. She wasn't sure where her mother's opinion would fall, but presenting her marriage to Darren as a fait accompli seemed the best course of action. Darren's family were shocked and disapproving, but at least they didn't cast him away. Of course, him being the reason for landing their company such a lucrative endorsement deal likely played a part in that decision. They spent their wedding night in a suite at the Four Seasons in downtown Denver. Nyla cast a look at her husband, sprawled on the bed next to her. His blonde hair was a mass around his peaceful face. She wanted to kiss him, but didn't want to wake him. This morning, they would tell her family the news. They had been shocked that she'd spent time in Paris with him, so she knew how they'd feel about her marrying him. She sent JR and Cam a text. "I'd like to meet with you both at JR's penthouse at 10. Are you available?" She and Darren had discussed meeting with everyone at once, but Nyla worried it would be overwhelming. They would meet with smaller units separately, beginning with JR and Cam, then moving to her grandparents. Her parents would come next. Then they'd make the trip to Silver Creek, Colorado, to meet with Miles. Of all her siblings, Miles would be the most accepting. And Eve, of course, but she was away at college, so they'd have to FaceTime with her. JR's response didn't take long.
10 works.
Cam's text followed.
I'll be there.
Several minutes later, she received a text from Britt. "Can I be at the meeting? Are you okay?" Nyla gave Britt the go-ahead before texting her grandmother and securing a visit for 10:30.
You're up early?
Darren crossed the room, the tie of his white hotel robe cinched around his waist. Leaning over, he kissed her neck. "I've been texting my family." Nyla closed her eyes for a second. "We'll start with Cam and JR, then move on to Gran and Pops."
Are you sure you want to do this today?
She nodded. "I don't want them to get blindsided if it somehow ends up in the media. You don't have to come if you don't want to."
Hey, enough of that talk. We're a team.
Taking her hand, he brought it to his lips for a kiss. The emerald-cut diamond of her wedding ring caught in the light, sending out a rainbow of light.
This looks so good on your hand.
They'd picked out the ring yesterday before the ceremony. The jeweler they'd met with had understood what they were looking for. All the ones he'd shown them had been incredibly lovely, but the instant Nyla had seen this one, she'd known they'd found the ring meant to be hers. Nyla dressed in a favorite autumn suit in a rust color, and Darren wore a suit for the meetings with her family. She wasn't sure why they dressed up, but she found when they walked through the doors to Silver Creek, looking professional gave her confidence. She gave a little laugh as the elevator stopped on 14. I can't recall ever feeling this nervous. Darren's hand, which had been on her arm, slipped down so he could lace his fingers with hers. Nothing they say will change anything. Nyla nodded, but she knew that wasn't quite true. While she agreed that nothing they said would change the fact that she and Darren loved each other and were married, they could, and might, say something that would cut the tenuous strand of hope she'd clung to since that last encounter. Her father and grandfather could banish her from their lives. Forever. Nyla took a deep breath and knocked on JR's door. She held up a hand that trembled to show Darren. Though he smiled, worry filled the dark depths of his eyes. He grabbed her hand and was still holding it when JR opened the door. The flash of surprise that skittered across her brother's face told her that while he'd expected her, he hadn't expected Darren. Flock? JR said, his voice cool. Hello, JR. Darren's polite smile didn't quite reach his eyes. We won't stay long, Nyla told her brother as he stepped back to let them enter. Cam, who'd been sitting on the sofa, rose to his feet when they entered the spacious room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. His gaze settled on Darren before returning to Nyla. Why did you bring him? Cameron. Darren offered the same pleasant smile he'd given JR. Ignoring him, Cam kept his gaze on Nyla. Why did you bring him? He repeated. He's my husband. Nyla turned and smiled at Darren. Though he smiled back, his dark eyes remained watchful. What kind of sick joke is this? Cam's blue eyes flashed. Puzzlement filled JR's eyes. Nyla, what's going on here? Do you think you're the only one who can fall in love? Nyla kept her tone even. She'd vowed to keep the interactions today as pleasant as possible. If the conversation went off the rails anyway, it wouldn't be because she lost her temper. You and Britt. Britt is not a flock. Did I hear my name? Britt, all smiles, came out of the hallway leading to the back bedroom. I'm sorry for being... Britt stopped, coming to an abrupt halt as her gaze slid from JR and Cam to Nyla, and then Darren. A second later, Britt crossed the room and laid a hand on Darren's arm, a smile on her face. It's good to see you again. Beside her, Nyla felt Darren let down his guard, just a little, and gratitude surged toward this woman who'd one day be her sister-in-law. The pleasure is all mine. Darren returned her smile. I've been following the promotions you've been doing on several of the Grizzlies players. Good stuff. Thank you. Britt started to say something, then appeared puzzled by the fact they were all still standing. Sit, please. Britt slanted a glance at JR. Yes, he echoed. Sit. It appears we have a lot to discuss. Dad would want us to throw him out, Cam warned. Our father isn't here, and this is my home, JR reminded his brother. Besides, Darren isn't just a flock. He's Nyla's husband. Husband? Britt whirled, then rushed to Nyla and pulled her in for a hug. Congratulations! I could tell the two of you were in love when I saw you at that Tex-Mex cafe. To Nyla's surprise, Britt turned to Darren and hugged him too. When she stepped back, she beamed. I hope you'll be very happy together. Britt? JR stepped forward to take his fiancé's arm, but he didn't rebuke her, as Nyla expected. This is not an ideal scenario. How can marrying someone you love ever be bad? Britt answered, shooting Nyla a wink. Britt could be excused for the naive response, Nyla knew. She hadn't grown up around here. Hadn't grown up in the Driscoll family, where the Flocks were both the devil and the boogeyman, all rolled into one family. She and Darren sat beside each other on the love seat, across from her brothers and Britt on the sofa. "We don't have to drag this out. I simply wanted to let you know that Darren and I married yesterday, and—" She paused. "Well, I thought you should know." Cam blew out a breath. "Is this because of Dad firing you and tossing you out? I would have helped you find another place to live and work." JR leaned forward, his attention fully focused on her. "What I believe Cam is trying to ask is, did you feel you had no other options?" Beside her, Nyla felt Darren tense. She stroked a hand down his arm, a gesture that appeared to calm him as much as it steadied her. "I had plenty of options. In case you haven't noticed, I'm quite capable of taking care of myself." She barely refrained from rolling her eyes. When had her brothers become such Neanderthals? "Bottom line is, I love Darren. We wanted to marry each other, so we did. I hope, in time, we can be a part of your lives and you can be a part of ours." "Are you going to work for Flock Inc.?" Cameron demanded, his jaw set in a hard line. Nyla gave a little laugh. "Well, as I've not been offered a position there, accepting one seems premature. Though, as I was abruptly fired from my last job despite years of outstanding work, I'd say I'm free to consider any opportunity I please." Cam's shoulders tensed. "You can't have so little respect for our father that—" "Respect goes both ways," Nyla snapped. Closing her eyes, she took a deep breath and slowly exhaled the way she'd learned from the meditation app. When she opened her eyes and looked at Cam, calm returned to her voice. "You heard what he said, Cam. How he belittled me for the choices I've made. Going forward, those choices will be about what's best for me, not what's best for him." "Where are you living?" Britt brightened, doing her best to break the tension. Nyla smiled. "We have a cabin in Morrison. I'll text you the address." "I'd love to see it sometime. I can't believe you got married before we did." Britt shook her head. "I wish we could have been there." "It was a simple ceremony." Nyla clasped Darren's hand. "But nice, despite no family in attendance." JR's gaze darted to Darren. "Your family wasn't there?" "They're no keener on Nyla and me being together than you are. But, as Nyla said, we hope in time both families will come around." Darren's voice remained pleasant and matter-of-fact. "Well," JR took a moment to swallow. "I wish you happiness." Cameron nodded, then shot Darren a glinting glance. "Take good care of my sister, or you'll answer to me." Nyla bristled. "I can take good care of myself." Darren brought Nyla's hand to his mouth and kissed her knuckles. "We take good care of each other." On the way out of the apartment, Nyla realized the tight ball in her chest had begun to loosen. Her brothers would come around. She expelled a long breath. "That wasn't as bad as I thought it'd be." "We're still in one piece." Though Darren's tone was light, worry furrowed his brow. "Your grandfather won't be an easy sell?" "Gran will be supportive. I'm hoping that will make the difference." But when they entered the penthouse on the top floor and Nyla saw her parents were there too, her heart simply stopped. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "Never you mind me." Ross pointed. "What's he doing here?" "Nyla, I'm so happy to see you." Gran hurried across the room to give her a quick hug, then cast a worried glance in Darren's direction. Her mother, Nyla noted with disappointment, remained at her father's side. "Nyla Jean, your father asked you a question." Pops had such malevolence in his eyes that Nyla stumbled back a step. That's when she realized Darren's arm rested loosely around her waist, a lifeline that she gladly held on to. "Everyone, I believe you know Darren Flock?" Nyla felt she could be excused if her voice trembled ever so slightly. "Darren and I were married yesterday. I hope you can be happy for us." "Is this a joke?" Ross's gaze lasered in on his daughter's face. If it is, it's not funny, not one bit. Pops went to the door and opened it. A flock is not welcome in my home. I can't believe you had the nerve to bring him here after what he did to us. Ross's voice held an edge of steel. He did nothing to us. Nyla kept her voice as steely as her dad's, even as the hope that had briefly blossomed inside her died. I had no reason to think that Ameline would be upset that I wasn't at the meeting, and neither did Darren. He didn't sabotage anything. Get out! Pops pointed toward the door. Johnny? Hal stepped forward, shooting an apologetic look in Nyla's direction. This is Nyla's husband. We can't— He's a flock, Pop said. I won't have a flock in my house. I am a flock now, Pops, Nyla said steadily. Her grandfather looked at her and shook his head. You made your choice. Now you're going to have to live with it. Though Nyla stayed strong in front of her family, once she and Darren reached home, she finally gave in to her grief. It struck Darren just how much she'd given up to be with him. A job she loved, a family she adored. Granted, it appeared her brothers would come around, but her father and grandfather were so adamant in their hatred of him, it was unlikely he and Nyla would be included in future family events. Thanksgiving and Christmas would be far different than what she was used to. And all because of him. They sat on the sofa, a fire blazing in the hearth, a movie on the big screen they pretended to watch. His arm was around her shoulders, and her sadness was nearly palpable. Do you regret marrying me? She hit the button to mute the sound and turned in his arms. Why would I ever regret that? He expelled a heavy breath. Because of me, you've lost so much. Perhaps we did rush into marriage. Maybe, given time, you'd have assessed the situation and decided what you'd lose wasn't worth, well, me. Her expression grew solemn, her blue eyes intense. Do you regret marrying me? This isn't about me. Answer me, Darren. Her eyes never left his face. Do you regret marrying me? No. His hand rose to cup her cheek. I love you, Nye. I want to spend the rest of my life being your husband, making you happy. No regrets. Not a single one. But you— She clasped his hand, her eyes never leaving his face. I'm sorry that my parents and grandparents can't get past a feud that started nearly 100 years ago. I wish things were different. I hope, in time, they'll come around. But I'm glad we got married. I want them to know that I'm all in with you. She rested her head on his shoulder. Right now, I'm just sad. Though their response wasn't unexpected, I still hoped. Her voice turned thick and broke. After a moment, she cleared her throat. We can't control what they think or feel. One arm stole around his waist as she burrowed in against him. Give me a few days to settle, and I promise I'll move on. This is your family, Nyla. Them turning their backs on you isn't something you can simply move on from in a few days. What's my choice? Wallow in self-pity? She shook her head. I've done what I can to reach out. There isn't anything else I can do. She turned the volume back on, and he realized that their discussion had come to an end. Going with her to see her family today had been his way of supporting her, but he realized that while she might have done everything she could to make things right, he had not. They were in this together. They were a team. Just because one player couldn't get the ball out of the red zone didn't mean a teammate, with a different playbook, couldn't take it past the goal line. Instead of watching the movie, Darren began mentally considering and rejecting what he could do to help Nyla reconcile with her family. There was no guarantee he'd succeed. The Driscolls were fierce opponents. But her parents and grandparents loved her. That was something he had in common with them. He would figure out a way to get past their defenses, knowing they'd all win if he succeeded. Chapter 11. Nyla's grandfather and dad enjoyed lunch every Tuesday at the Denver Country Club. Darren knew that because initially Nyla had considered meeting them there to tell them about her marriage to Darren. The idea had been quickly discarded because it had been impossible to know how the two men would respond. No need to create a public spectacle. As he doubted either man would willingly meet with him elsewhere, Darren decided he'd take the chance on the spectacle. His family were members of the club, and there were no security guards he'd have to get around. He'd show up at noon, join them at their table, and take it from there. Strolling through the doors to the club, Darren accepted congratulations from several members on his way to the dining room. The deal that Flock had signed with Ameline had been blasted far and wide by the media. Tomorrow he'd meet with his design team to continue work on her line of shoes. For now, his focus was on family. Standing in the entrance to the dining room, Darren let his gaze scan the room. He spotted the two men at a table off to the side by a set of large windows. He approved of the location, which offered more privacy than some of the other tables. "I'll be joining the Driscolls. Put their lunches on my tab." The hostess, a woman in her 40s with her hair pulled back in a chignon, nodded, her face expressionless. She'd been working here for a long time, which meant she knew you never sat a Driscoll by a flock. "I'll seat myself." Taking the menu she offered, though he doubted he'd be there long enough to eat, Darren strode directly to the table, pulled out a chair, and sat. Ross looked up from his soup. "What the—" Johnny's blue eyes pinned him as he spoke at the same time as his son. "We don't—" "Want to cause a scene?" Darren finished for him. Keeping a pleasant smile on his face, he set down his menu. "I've been considering how this should go. The easiest way is that I talk, you listen. Then I'll leave. That way we won't give any of our fellow club members the fireworks they're hoping to see." Plastering a fake smile on his tightened lips, Ross nodded. "Say your piece, then get out." Johnny opened his mouth, his gaze shrewd and assessing. After a long moment, he closed his mouth and nodded. "I'm here because of Nyla. She loves you both, and I know you love her. Turning your back on her the way you have is wrong." Darren paused when the waitress stopped by the table with a glass of water. He handed her the menu. "I'm not really hungry." Once the young woman was out of earshot, Darren refocused on the two men. "She feels she's done all she can to reach out, and frankly, I think she's done way more than you deserve after the way you've treated her. Why are you here?" Ross gave up pretending to eat his soup. "She's done all she can, but I realized I haven't. I was there with her yesterday for support, but it was her show. She had things she needed to say." "We made ourselves clear yesterday." A muscle jumped in Ross's jaw. "I don't know what you think to accomplish by being here." "I love your daughter. She's a strong, intelligent woman with a big heart, a heart that you broke. I wouldn't be a good husband if I didn't do everything I can to try to bridge the gap between you and her." "We don't want you in the family." Johnny's disapproval shimmered in the air like a red haze. "Well, you've got me. I'm not going anywhere." Darren shifted his gaze from one man to the other. "I believe it's human nature to think we have all the time in the world to make things right. My mother walked out on me and my siblings. I was angry and hurt that she could just leave her kids behind and start a new life. Still, in the back of my mind, I always thought one day I'd reach out to her to try to reconcile. She died in a car accident before that happened. You cannot imagine how much it haunts me that I didn't get a chance to tell her at least one time that I still loved her. Regardless of the past, regardless of whatever pain I endured because of her actions, I still loved her. And I didn't get to tell her because I was too slow. It breaks my heart that she died not knowing that." He paused to assess that each man was listening, rapt, just as he'd intended. "Now, if you would kindly humor me and consider a similar scenario with your daughter." He looked directly at Ross and then at Johnny. And your granddaughter. And add the consideration that Nyla has been nothing but a devoted daughter and granddaughter, focused for years now on furthering the interests of the Driscoll family, with the same kind of fortitude and focus that you have. She deserves better, from both of you, than to be tossed out of her beloved family because of some petty, 100-year-old feud that, in the scheme of things, means absolutely nothing now. Taking a breath, Darren pushed back his chair and stood. He handed each man a business card on which he'd written the address of the cabin in Morrison. I wish I could stay longer, but business calls. Darren spoke in a loud voice for anyone listening. Stop out any time. We'd love to see you. He didn't wait for their response, simply strolled out. He'd done his part. The ball was now in their court. That night, Nyla glanced down at the slice of pizza on her plate. When Darren had told her he'd make dinner, actually make dinner, she'd laughed. But he'd given it the old college try. After 2 bites, he dropped the slice in front of him back on the plate in disgust. We should have ordered in. I haven't tried it yet, but I'm sure it tastes better than it looks. Nyla studied the crust. The rolling pin might have been a bad idea. It's soggy, and I never thought I'd say this about pizza, but it has too much cheese. Darren wiped his greasy fingers on a napkin before pulling out his phone. Time to call in the professionals. Before he could look up the nearest pizzeria, a knock sounded at the door. Nyla glanced at him. Are you expecting someone? Only the pizza delivery guy once I get this order in. Darren smiled and brushed some flour off her cheek. Hearing the front door open, she rose and called out, Who is it? As she headed into the other room. Company. What kind of... Nyla halted as she saw her parents and grandparents walk into the living room. Her heart tripped over itself. This is a nice surprise. Have a seat. Can I get anyone anything to drink? I'm afraid there's nothing to eat. We made a pizza, and, well, it didn't turn out so good, so... Nyla stopped herself, realizing with sudden horror that her jangled nerves had her rambling. You have a nice place here. Hal moved to her, taking her hands and gripping them tightly. It's so good to see you. This is where you live? Her mother glanced around, appearing puzzled by the simple surroundings. This reminds me of the place you had in Silver Creek, Margene, Hal said, when you and Ross were starting out, before the babies started coming. Hal sighed. I loved that home. Please, sit. Darren gestured to the sofas. Once everyone was seated, with Darren standing behind her chair, Nyla offered her family a tentative smile. I didn't realize you knew where I live now. Darren told us. Johnny's voice was cool. He stopped by our table at the club today. Nyla turned and looked up at her husband. You didn't say anything to me about that. She couldn't quite keep the hurt from her voice. Just extending the olive branch, he told her, his hand softly kneading her shoulders. I wasn't sure anything would come of it, and I didn't want to get your hopes up. Ross cleared his throat. I've been doing some thinking, and while I'm not happy about some things, I let my anger get the better of me. Tears pushed at the backs of Nyla's eyes, but she blinked them back. Telling you I didn't want you running the Grizzlies was a mistake. You did an excellent job in your position there. I hope you'll consider returning to the helm. Nyla met her father's gaze. She wasn't sure how she felt about that just yet, but she'd give it some thought later. What about the other, Dad? All the other things you said. Do you still feel that way? Am I happy you married a flock? Ross pushed aside the warning hand his wife put on his arm. Nyla wants honesty, and that's what I'm giving her. Nyla felt Darren's hand still on her shoulders. Her heart began an erratic rhythm. I do want honesty. I love you, Nyla, her father said. From the time you were a little girl. You knew what you wanted and what you didn't. None of us ever had much luck in changing your mind once it was made up." Ross lifted his gaze to meet Darren's. "Even if we'd known you were dating this guy, we couldn't have changed your mind. But I must say, he showed me the kind of man he is when he came to meet with me and Pops today." "And what kind of man is that, Dad?" "Someone who truly loves you." Ross cleared his throat. "I'm sorry for the things I said to you. They were unfair, and you didn't at all deserve them." Nyla saw the regret in his eyes, and the hope. Still, she knew how close her father was to his own dad. If Johnny didn't approve, fixing their relationships might prove impossible. "What about you, Pops?" Nyla shifted her attention to her grandfather. "Do you have anything to say?" "As long as you don't expect us to socialize with his family, I think we can bring the boy into the fold." Johnny shrugged. "Maybe in time, with a lot of work, we'll make a Driscoll out of him." Behind her, Nyla heard Darren cover a laugh with a cough. "We came here hoping to move forward." Ross's gaze never wavered. "We'd like you and your husband to come to dinner, Sunday evening. I think it's time we got to know our son-in-law." Nyla's heart swelled. "I'd like that." When her mother rose and moved to her for a hug, Nyla could no longer hold back the tears. Her grandmother came next, then her father and grandfather. Darren stood back, watching, a smile on his face, basking in her happiness. Once they were alone again, Nyla moved to him. His arms slid around her. "Thank you." "I didn't do much. Just said some stuff." He tenderly brushed a strand of hair back from her face with the tip of one finger. "Whatever you said brought my family back to me." "I want you happy, Nyla. That's all I've ever wanted." She smiled. "Then let's order a pizza." The last mentoring meeting took place the following evening at Silver Creek. As she walked into the meeting room a few minutes early, Nyla thought about all that had transpired in the last month. Sometimes it seemed like one of those dreams where you're ecstatic one minute, then plunging into darkness the next. That was life, Nyla thought. Unpredictable and sometimes as scary as a roller coaster ride. She was thankful to have her feet on solid ground. The women began arriving. One by one, they rushed over to Nyla, congratulating her on her marriage. Today was their wrap-up session in which they'd discuss what they learned, what they felt worked, what didn't, and where they went from here. Olivia glanced around the table. "What I enjoyed most about these meetings was getting a new group of friends who I know I can call on when I need to bounce an idea off someone who understands. Because of your guidance, I have a better idea of how to deal with harassment in the future. I mean, hopefully I won't be harassed in the future." Trini's eyes went wide, and the group let out a small laugh. "But it's good to know that I can handle whatever comes up. I've discovered it's important to think ahead. While I like my current position, I don't love it." Simone's expression turned pensive. "I'll stick with it because I'm not miserable, and because I don't want to look like someone who job hops. But my next job will be more of what I want." "Because of my volunteer work at the middle school," Amber said, "I've realized I'd like to be a teacher, helping and encouraging kids to do their best, to be their best." She smiled. "I've made some calls and will be taking steps to get my teaching certificate." "That's fabulous, Amber!" Katie lifted her hand for a high five. "What about you, Katie?" Olivia asked before Nyla could. "We haven't heard from you yet." My biggest takeaway is to not let anyone else take credit for my work, and to make sure my boss knows I want to get ahead." Katie turned to Nyla. "I'm not the last one to speak. You are." When all eyes turned to her, Nyla smiled. "Like all of you, I've learned much during our month together. I would say, for me, the biggest takeaway is the importance of having a well-rounded life." Nyla glanced down at the notes she'd carefully compiled that she wouldn't end up using. In a way, the notes were a metaphor for her life. Except, the thought just struck me that I put together notes for today's discussion that I won't be using. My mind immediately says, what a waste. But is it? Nyla swept the table with her gaze. Compiling the information made me think. What a great group we are, Katie teased. Of course. Nyla chuckled, then sobered. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Darren standing in the doorway. Her heart swelled with love. How had she gotten so lucky? It made me realize that we shouldn't be afraid to let go of our carefully constructed plans, because when we do, amazing things can happen. Nyla's gaze met Darren's and locked. She smiled. Wonderful, amazing things. This has been Don't Say Maybe by Cindy Kirk, narrated by Amy McFadden, a member of SAG-AFTRA. Copyright 2020 by Cynthia Rutledge. Production copyright 2021 by Cynthia Rutledge. Thank you for listening.